My mother-in-law accuses me of wanting to take over the family property after snooping through my belongings. But in front of the family, I tell her it was a trap set by her son. My husband and I have been together for 4 years. We've lived together for the past 2 years and have been married for a year. Our relationship is pretty peaceful, if you leave out the demon that is my mother-in-law. Although, honestly, I don't feel bad for her because she doesn't seem to like many people. So we've made peace with that. We maintain a cordial relationship with her. We invite her to dinners and events, and she does the same, but we don't have a deeper relationship. A couple of months ago, my father-in-law passed away from a heart attack. That really made me more understanding of my mother-in-law, since I was very young when I lost my dad. I know what that kind of thing does to families, especially my mom. I know how difficult it was for her after my father's death, so I made an effort to be nicer to her. We decided to start inviting her over for dinner every other weekend, and I could tell that, at least at first, she was grateful for it. After that, I don't know why, but she started snooping around our house. It took us a while to realize, but after a while, we were pretty sure that was exactly what he was doing. Every time, before or after dinner, he would excuse himself to go to the bathroom and take a while. But we never thought much of it, beyond the fact that the food had upset him and he needed to purge. Then she started learning things we'd never told her about, and she started asking us about them. Every time we tried to confront her about how she found out, she'd tell me she just guessed. But we weren't stupid. We knew there was no way she'd be that lucky with her guesses, and that they were all absolutely correct. For example, a couple of weeks ago, she somehow found out that my husband was considering a merger with another company. She was against that kind of thing because she believed it would show weakness, and she didn't want that to be the legacy of the company my father-in-law had built. So she confronted my husband about it, and we were puzzled as to how she had found out, since neither of us had told her anything. We knew she wouldn't take it well, so we planned to break the news to her contact. However, she found out, and that was that. They had a minor argument about it, and in the end, my husband had to give in and abandon his plans because his mother made a fuss. Also, since my father-in-law's death was so recent, I didn't want to make her feel worse. But try as we might, we couldn't figure out how she'd found out. Then, just 2 weeks ago, after dinner, she confronted me about my plans to freeze my eggs. I'd never spoken about it with anyone other than my husband. When I asked him how he knew, he told me he'd been lucky with his fortune telling. Then he started giving me a lecture about how bad it was for me, based on his own feelings, which weren't backed up by facts. He told me I was young, and that instead of doing all that, I should start trying to have children and focus more on my family, instead of spending all day working, because that way things would be much better for everyone, and I wouldn't have to end up freezing my eggs and spending a ton of money on it. Obviously, after that, I was really upset, because I was somehow finding out things I had no way of knowing. By then, we had already deduced that he was snooping every time he came over to our house. It wasn't hard to figure out because our home office is across the hall from the bathroom. So we assumed she must be lying to us about going to the bathroom and wasn't firing up last night's enchiladas. Or maybe she was just taking a couple more minutes to snoop through our papers. The fusion plans were in the office, and I had a few tabs open on my laptop, also about freezing my eggs, where I was doing my research just before my mother-in-law arrived for dinner that day. These were the main clues that led us to discover what was really going on. But aside from these two, there were a couple of minor incidents not worth mentioning, but which alerted us. So, after dinner 2 weeks ago, when my mother-in-law left after giving me her lecture on the importance of family values, especially when we're young, I really lost my patience. I told my husband I couldn't do this anymore. I did my best to be a little more understanding, even though she'd always made it clear she didn't like me. But now, she was really invading our boundaries. I thought maybe we'd have to cut back on our dinners together, because this was already getting out of hand. Of course, if we accused her of snooping, she'd deny it and somehow play the victim. So we knew there was no point in confronting her. My husband agreed that she had crossed a line, and that something had to be done about it. We spent a couple of days very upset about the whole thing, but it was my husband who came up with a plan to screw her over. And it was actually brilliant, because this would totally prove that she had been snooping around in our things. We decided to print out a fake divorce petition, and made sure it looked real enough to convince someone. We made the terms of the petition very unfair to my husband. We both laughed a lot because it was really funny. Since we made the terms of the petition sound like I was seeking to take all the property belonging to him and his family, I knew that would really infuriate my mother-in-law. She already didn't like the fact that her son had married someone from a less privileged family than hers. I'm not saying I grew up poor or anything, but to my mother-in-law, if you cross a city line, It's like you're a commoner or something. However, he's not arrogant about it, unlike his mother. Anyway, we knew this was going to infuriate her, and our plan actually worked. A couple of days ago, we invited her over for dinner, but this time we also invited other family members. We had a big family dinner with my sister-in-law, her husband, and their children, and my husband's uncle and aunt. I get along well with them, and knew this would give them a laugh too. We were having a good time after dinner when, as usual, my mother-in-law excused herself to go to the bathroom. But this time, he didn't return until almost 30 minutes later. We knew what he was doing, but my sister-in-law started asking if he was okay. We told her not to worry, that when he comes, he always spends a little extra time in the bathroom, that we thought our house was helping him feel better, and that it was normal. Just as we expected, a couple of minutes after everyone had gotten worried, my mother-in-law burst into the living room with the papers we had purposely left in one of the office drawers, waving them angrily and yelling at me. She began cursing me, saying I had turned out to be exactly the kind of person she had hoped I would be. She said she always suspected she was wrong to let her son marry me, because she should have known I would look for the first opportunity to ruin their lives. And that's exactly what she was doing. Obviously, my husband and I weren't surprised by any of this, but everyone else was very confused and tried to ask her what was going on. Then, she told them she'd found those divorce papers at the office and started telling everyone I'd filed for divorce. My sister-in-law's husband asked her, then she wasn't sitting on the toilet, and my mother-in-law looked at him strangely and continued her attack. According to the terms of my request, I was going after everything they owned, all their property, and even their company. Even though my husband had been nothing but kind to me, and I knew perfectly well I wasn't entitled to any of it, she said she'd probably been waiting for an opportunity like this after my father-in-law's death. And since this was the perfect moment to strike, I began to reveal my true intentions. He called me gold digger, a snake, and said he wished nothing but the worst things for me. My husband and I remained calm. We didn't say anything, and I didn't lose my temper because we'd all seen this coming. We just waited patiently for her to finish her monologue while the others remained completely confused. When she seemed to run out of energy, we decided to finally tell her that this was a trap we'd set for her, and that she'd obviously fallen right into it. I told her that it was my husband and I who printed those papers for her to find because we knew this was going to happen, and it was pretty foolish of her to assume that. Even if I were filing for divorce, I would keep the divorce papers in the same home office we both use frequently. Then, finally, she started to look confused and flipped through the petition papers once more, and it finally began to dawn on her that we had tricked her. I told her we had done all this just to prove that she had been snooping around every time she came to our house. We made sure family was around when she did this scene, so everyone would know what kind of person she was, and how much she hated me, even though I had nothing against her, and had even tried to be nice to her over the past few months. But she wasn't grateful. She was an incredibly selfish woman who couldn't see the good in anyone. We told her that after everything she said, there was no way we were letting her get involved in our lives again, and that we were done after such a level of disrespect. Then, she immediately started crying, saying she'd been cheated on, which obviously was true, but the truth came out that way, and we didn't want anything to do with her after that. The dinner ended on a sour note, and everyone else there decided not to talk about it anymore. But my mother-in-law has been seeking sympathy from anyone who will listen. By now, almost the entire family knows what happened at dinner that day. Some people are sympathetic. Some people have messaged us to tell us we did the right thing, but everyone seems to have an opinion about this. Anyway, we don't really care about that, but we do believe my mother-in-law has taken this very badly because, in addition to telling everyone, she's been texting my husband and trying to call him from time to time. She's been telling him I'm a malicious daughter-in-law, that I've turned his head, and all sorts of nonsense about me. She's been saying I'm manipulating him against her, and that I'm eventually going to break up this family, because apparently, if I can do something like this, I'll be able to do worse things in the future. The funniest thing is that it was my husband's idea. Even though I knew she'd just lost her husband a couple of months ago, and she was just trying to take care of her son like any mother would, and that's why she'd been snooping around. Now, even though it was actually my husband's idea, I went along with it. The only thing I feel guilty about is that we did it just a couple of months after her husband died. I know she was really devastated after that. I don't feel bad about anything else. This is the only part that feels a little heavy on my mind, and my conscience is pricking me now. So, do you think I should apologize for that? Nothing more, just that part. Edit. The reason my husband hasn't blocked his mother yet is because, obviously, she's older, and he doesn't want to regret his actions if something were to happen to her. I think it's a pretty valid reason not to want to block her, even though she's been horrible to us the past few weeks, and we don't want to hear anything from her right now. But in case of emergencies, we still want to be accessible to her because otherwise, I think it would be very unforgivable. Update 1. I hope you're all well. It's been 6 days since my last update, and we've stopped feeling guilty about what we did. Because, honestly, if she hadn't been snooping around, if she hadn't actively gone looking for what we were doing, instead of just doing the right thing and waiting for us to come to her with whatever news we had, then none of this would have happened. And besides, there was no need for her to make such a scene at family dinner. If she was really that upset about what she'd found, she could have waited and confronted us privately. Then, perhaps it would have been less embarrassing for her when she realized she was wrong. But no, she immediately believed the worst, decided to come and confront me in public, wanting to humiliate me. She said the most horrible things about me. So, I really don't think I should feel bad about what I did. The fact that her husband recently passed away is sad, but it doesn't excuse her behavior, very honestly. Anyway, as I mentioned, there were a few people who contacted us to tell us we'd done the right thing because the rumors were really spreading throughout the family, thanks to my mother-in-law. I don't know why she had to go and tell the whole family just to get a little sympathy. If anything, that distanced us from her even more, because at least we weren't telling everyone what had happened and trying to paint ourselves as victims. Yes, what we did at dinner maybe wasn't the nicest thing. We shouldn't have invited other family members, but they're pretty close to us, and we didn't want her to be able to deny anything about her behavior later, because I'm pretty sure she would have. At least now everyone knows the truth, can decide, and have their own opinions. And little by little, that number has been growing because, as I mentioned at the beginning, there are many people in the family who really don't get along with my mother-in-law, because she's not a very nice person in general, and she has a tendency to look down on people. Not just me in particular, she always has something negative to say about everyone. So, she has a kind of reputation, a very negative one, and this isn't working in her favor. I'm so glad this backfired because she was the one who decided to start gossiping about it. Obviously, the people who were at the family dinner haven't said anything about it yet, and they've made it very clear that they're completely fine with being on good terms with all of us. They just don't want to get involved in the drama, and we respect that. We've even apologized to them for dumping all this on them, but we also explained our side of the story, because it was important for them to be there at dinner so they could witness my mother-in-law's behavior, so she couldn't deny it later, and they understood that too. So everything's fine between us, and we respect the fact that they don't want to get dragged into this mess because, honestly, we wouldn't want to be in their shoes. And I'm pretty sure there are some people who are sympathizing with my mother-in-law too. They can continue to do so. Most of them are the elders in the family, and they've also made their point clear. It's not like they've contacted me directly or anything, but I've heard from some people that these older relatives are siding with my mother-in-law, and they've been telling everyone not to talk to us and, in some way, pressuring us to apologize. Well, this will continue for a while. I can see it coming. But I'm glad to have some support on my side, at least, even without it. I think my husband and I would have been enough for each other, but we're grateful for what we have. Update 2. Everything can change in 2 weeks, and it's a bit annoying. Not because of the situation itself, but because my mother-in-law thinks she's entitled to something when she's the one who acted wrongly. But that's how things are with her, and one day she'll realize all the wrong she's done. Only maybe that day will come when I do something really bad and face the consequences. Basically, for the first few days after my last update, we didn't hear from her, and everything was going well because we thought this would finally blow over. But then, she decided to send my husband a very mean email about me, saying that everything I had said in the petition would eventually come true one day, and that day, my husband was going to regret not paying attention to his mother about me, because she knew I was only after him for his money and social status, and nothing else. And she knows what kind of woman I am. She knows that if I'm willing to stoop that low just to put her in her place, there's no telling what I might do. He also said he'd crawl back to her for comfort, but she wouldn't be there for him because she'd be so hurt that in this dire situation, he was choosing me over her. And the worst part is, she still has no idea the plan wasn't even mine. It was her son who came up with it. After that horrible message about me, my husband decided to tell her it wasn't even my idea, that it was his plan because he was fed up with her constantly interfering in his life. This wasn't anything new. She had always been like this since he was a child, and she always tried to control him. He never liked his girlfriends, and basically, he never liked anyone he was romantically involved with. I was obviously the last person, and obviously, he didn't like me either, and he never understood why, since I'd never done anything to make her feel that way. And in fact, despite her behavior, I always maintained my dignity and was very civil and cordial with her. After he told her it was his plan, he thought maybe she'd calm down with me. But then she decided to turn everything around and make it my fault. I don't even know how that was possible. I have to say I was quite surprised. But anyway, when she found out it was his idea, it took her a couple of hours, but then she finally responded, saying that it didn't matter whose idea it was. What mattered was that I had agreed to it, and that if I truly respected her as my mother-in-law, I would never have agreed to something so base and disgusting. So surprise, surprise, it was still my fault, and she wasn't willing to admit that maybe I wasn't to blame in this situation. It's literally insane. Anyway, when she started blaming me for all of this, my husband couldn't take it anymore. I had literally handed it to him that it had been his idea all along, and I had nothing to do with it, other than the fact that I had supported him. But even then, she somehow turned it into something ugly and made it my fault, saying that I had probably turned him against her to do something like this. It was the final straw for him, so he decided to block her. And honestly, it was something that was long overdue. She'd been trying her luck for a while, and she'd already gone too far. Personally, I was pretty glad she finally decided to block her, because I really didn't want this kind of drama to continue. It was getting annoying. So, after blocking her, we decided to finally put an end to it. But of course, that wasn't the case, because my mother-in-law decided to show up at our house the next day because she couldn't get in touch with him. And that's the worst thing in the world for a narcissist. In fact, if I'm being precise, she came only to confront her son, because she made that very clear when I tried to talk to her. We opened the door. We let her in because we were trying to be polite about the whole thing. But as soon as she was inside, she started yelling at my husband, saying he was letting me manipulate him, and that he needed to be smarter about what he was doing, that he looked stupid because he was so easily manipulated by someone like me, emphasizing that part, as if implying that I wasn't very smart, and that being able to manipulate him was a bit of a challenge. She told him she wasn't going to allow him to treat her that way, especially since she'd lost her husband so recently, because it wasn't the right thing to do, and he needed to know that. She told him he was on the wrong path, and that the only solution would be to somehow get me out of his life. And if she couldn't do that, at least what she could do was teach me to be more respectful to her instead of being so disgusting. I didn't like that at all. I tried to talk to her and tell her she couldn't talk to me like that. And then he literally turned around and came at me, pushing into my personal space, and started telling me that I had no right to tell him what he could or couldn't do under his son's roof. He literally started waving his finger in my face, and it was crazy. I took his finger and put it on his nose, because no one was going to come talk to me like that, especially not in my house. And when my husband saw all this happening, and that I was losing my patience, he decided to physically grab her arm and tell her he didn't trust her, especially after everything that had been said and done. My mother-in-law didn't like that at all, and she started crying, saying she couldn't believe I would treat her like this after everything she had lost in her life. She claimed she was only trying to protect him, and that she was trying to protect him from me. People like me didn't deserve it, and he should know it. By this point, I was really fed up with all this. So I told my husband I was going for a walk and would come back after she left, because I really didn't want to ruin my mood by dealing with her. It was a Sunday, and I'd had a pretty hectic week, so I didn't want to deal with her and ruin my weekend. After that, I went for a walk and came back about an hour later, and by then, she'd already left. So that was that. And now, we're not talking to her. And we're pretty happy about that because honestly, we have nothing to say to her. And I hope she has nothing to say to us after this point. I think she's caused us enough trouble. We don't need any more. So I really hope she stays away from us after this. Update 3, I have some good news. A couple of weeks ago, my husband and I found out I'm pregnant. I'd been thinking about freezing my eggs, but I guess it's no longer necessary. We thought about it and decided to go ahead with it because now is a good time to do it. We recently posted it on social media and everyone congratulated us. But of course, my mother-in-law had something negative to say. She'd been blocked everywhere, so she decided to contact us through a new email account. She told my husband that now that he was starting a family with me, he was going to see my true colors. She wished him luck, saying he would definitely need it. Obviously, she won't have anything to do with me, my husband, or his future grandchild. With that email, she sealed her fate. She was very passive-aggressive about it. But anyway, we're happy, and she can't take that away from us, no matter how hard she tries. Update 4, I can't believe it's been a year since I last wrote. Back then, I had my issues with my mother-in-law, but now we're best friends. Okay, that last part isn't true, but I have become a mother. But much more has changed in my life, in our lives recently. Besides my mother-in-law's. My little girl was born big and strong, and we're happy with her. It's been hard for us to adjust to being parents, but I think we've got that sorted out. Now, my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law has tried everything she could to upset me during my pregnancy, but she hasn't succeeded. She didn't take the traditional route of continuing to text me from different numbers or turning people against me. That's not what you expect with someone like my mother-in-law. Instead, she tried to make my husband jealous so he'd leave me. And then she did something even crazier. A few weeks or months after my last update, she started inviting a young man to her house for dinner. Someone young like my husband. You might be thinking, this woman got herself a lover, good for her. But no, it was a new son she adopted, not legally of course, to replace my husband. I told other people he was the son every mother wanted, because he did for her what my husband didn't. He loved her, listened to her, and cared for her like a mother. My husband didn't care for a second. And he even found what his mother was doing funny. He said, when we thought she had a stomach bug it was cute, now it's even sad. When he saw that my husband didn't care and carried on with his life as if nothing had changed, which wasn't my mother-in-law's intention, he stepped up his efforts. She started going to the family business because she believed her new son should start learning about the business. However, the business remained completely in my husband's hands. His sister has a stake in the company, but she doesn't participate and has her own career. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, received her house and some money. So it's not my mother-in-law's decision to work there. Until she finally realized that none of it was working, and she needed to step up her efforts, or she simply said, screw it, and didn't hide it anymore. She started dating her newly adopted son, or at least openly. Now there's a rumor that she might marry him, which may be true or just more rumors to annoy us. But my husband and sister-in-law aren't interested because, as I explained, she doesn't own a stake in the company, and all it will do is ruin her future if something bad happens. But beyond hoping she doesn't do anything stupid, my husband isn't going to do anything for her. He's tired of doing it. Like when we invited her to our house because she was upset about her husband. But if we count from the time she introduced him as her son to the date she started dating him, we're talking about a little over 5 months after losing her husband. And she was in a new relationship, which seems to me a clear example of emotional incest, because it would have been better to introduce him as her boyfriend from the start than to say he was her son first. It seems like he has some kind of perverse fantasy. Well, I guess my mother-in-law has done more things during this time. But we were busy with my pregnancy and then with our daughter, so that's what we discovered or what's come to us. Update 5. About 2 years ago, my mother-in-law got married. We were invited to the wedding, but few people attended. Not even his sister wanted to go to that nonsense, according to him. She was married for a little over a year, until he asked for a divorce. But during all that time, she paid for the trips they took together, his car, and other expenses, as his income as a fitness trainer wasn't high enough to support that lifestyle. She even put the house they lived in his name as well. As a result, she's exhausted her savings, had to sell the house in the divorce to divide the assets, and had to move to a new, significantly smaller home. Of course, she asked my husband to help her buy out her soon-to-be ex-husband's share because she didn't want the family home to leave the family. But my husband offered to buy the entire property, since he wasn't going to help her. So my mother-in-law agreed, although in the process there were several scandals about her son not helping her, and so on. We've now moved into that much larger house after making some improvements. My mother-in-law has at least managed to buy a house with the share she got from her own property. But as far as her personal finances go, things aren't looking good at all, because she's been asking my husband and sister-in-law for money. Neither of them has been willing to give her anything, especially my sister-in-law. She was the most vocal in telling him he was making a mistake marrying that man. I guess she inherited some things from her mother. But unlike her mother, she was right. So that's all there is to it with my mother-in-law. Sometimes I think her jealousy, hatred for me, and all that poison she had inside led her to make the worst decisions. That's why when I find out something new about my mother-in-law and start to think I hate her, I try to calm down, because I don't want to end up like her. Hate has consumed her, and I don't want to go down that path. My friend's boyfriend moved into our apartment without paying rent, and gave me a list of rules I have to follow. But the only rules I follow are karma's. I'm exactly 28 years old, and I moved into my current apartment a little over a year ago. You can't imagine how long I've been looking for something like this. Just thinking about how I felt about this apartment before almost brings tears to my eyes. Because now, instead of a dream, It's turning into a nightmare. The worst part is that it's a nightmare of my own making. I moved here with my good friend Luna. No, her real name isn't Luna. It's a nickname I gave her, but don't expect her to use real names online. Aside from the nickname, none of the details in real life are true. So, I've known Luna for a while, as we used to work together. We get along really well, and love each other very much. Honestly, if I didn't care, I wouldn't be in this situation in the first place, and I would have gotten out of it a long time ago. Living together has been surprisingly better than I thought it would be. She cooks better than I do, and we watched our favorite shows together almost every night. Almost every Friday night, we had a wine and vent session. Since we moved in, we've become much better friends than we were before. Maybe it was the extra love and care I gained by moving that pushed me to make that terrible decision. But no one can blame me because, at the time, it seemed like a great decision. I was just helping a friend. You see, ever since I've known Luna, there's one thing I've noticed. She has incredibly bad luck when it comes to dating. Honestly, if I hadn't seen so many of her relationships fall apart, I wouldn't be saying this. I can say without a doubt that if there's a warning sign walking within a 5-meter radius, she'll immediately fall for it. I can't explain to you how her power works, so to speak, or why she hasn't done the opposite of what she feels. If she had, she'd probably be married by now. But you know, we have to live with the cards we're dealt. For a while, Luna was trying really hard to find a nice guy. And then all of a sudden, she found Luke, a really handsome gentleman who wasn't as much of a jerk as her usual type. I had to double check a few times to make sure there was nothing fishy going on, based on Luna's experiences. But the guy was genuinely interested in her, which didn't make sense because Luna only attracted other types of men. She has this sort of curse that drives her to do anything to ruin him. But then something happened that made me think otherwise. For the first time in a long time, I saw that Luna wasn't sure if she should go out with him. You have to understand, this never happens. Luna's favorite quote is, "Eyes closed, head forward, nothing to lose." So you can see why I was surprised and why I felt like this time might be different. Honestly, I haven't seen Luna this happy since we moved in or the time she went out with a guy, and for a brief period, she thought he was in love with her. I don't think I need to explain how that ended. Now, fast forward a few months. Luna and Luke are in love, while I'm in hell. No, I'm not jealous of her. I'm very happy for her, but I just wish I didn't have to experience their relationship like I'm paying a monthly subscription. What I mean is, I don't feel comfortable with Luke being in our apartment all the time, because I'm already on the verge of moving into a tent in the parking lot. I feel like I'm living with a tall, annoying guy instead of Luna, which would be fine if I'd chosen to do that, but I haven't. When Luke first started staying at our place, I was more than happy to welcome him, because he only stayed 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes less. He's a clean, efficient guy who was more than happy to do any work around the house while he was in our apartment. At first, everything was perfect, as I only had to see him in small doses. But little by little, he kept coming back more and more and more. I kept trying to work up the courage to tell Luna that I didn't like Luke being here all the time. You have to understand, this is the first time I've seen Luna so happy, and I didn't want to ruin anything by changing even the smallest things. So things kept getting worse, and at this point, Luke is in our apartment 5 to 6 days a week. Sometimes I see him more than Luna. He's there when she's not so well, and I really feel like I'm being the third wheel in my own place. But that's not even the end of my problems. You see, at first I tried to hold on for my friend's happiness, but things just kept getting worse. Our activities together became her and Luke's activities. They did things without me, and watching anything together became a big problem, because they would just watch everything without me and ruin things when I did. The worst part is Luke's rules. At first, I didn't find it bothersome, but the more he talked about his rules, the more I started to dislike him. Luke slowly started trying to tell me how I should live in my own apartment. One morning, I simply found a note saying we should all start putting away dishes immediately after using them, as it was more efficient. I was shocked because this man, who didn't pay rent or buy anything in the house, was trying to tell me how to do things. I ignored him, but his rules kept growing. He tried to tell me I shouldn't leave my shoes where I had them because he didn't like the way they looked. I told him I'd think about it, but I didn't do anything. A few days later, I discovered he'd moved them himself and also changed the layout of our living rooms without discussion because I was giving him negative vibes. I really wanted to strangle him and ask him if he could read the vibe I was giving off. This kind of thing started happening daily, and I tried to tell Luna I wasn't happy with how things were going. I'd say things like, "Why does Luke have an apartment if he lives here all the time?" And she'd just laugh. I also told her I wasn't comfortable with him being here all the time. She told me she'd try, that she was going to talk to him, but she hasn't done anything about it yet. I told her several times that I wasn't happy, but obviously that didn't change her, or even Luke's, attitude. Which brings us to the turning point, which is what I'm going to tell you about now. So, a few days ago, we were watching something together, and Luke started giving me a lecture about how I was doing a lot of things wrong. Doing things his way would make my life so much better. I was already so frustrated with everything that was happening, and the fact that it was all my fault. I was frustrated that I couldn't talk to Luna about it. So hearing all this really made me explode. I told her to stop, and we ended up arguing. In the heat of the moment, when he asked me if I should leave and make my life easier, I said yes. I explained that I would be the happiest person in the world if he left. I asked him why he was paying rent for his apartment when I was living here for free. He told me this was Luna's apartment too, and I replied that maybe they should get one together instead of making my life miserable. Neither of them liked that, and now they see me as the bad guy. I don't consider myself the bad guy. I'm just tired of telling Luna that over and over again. I've told Luke many times that I wasn't going to follow his rules because it was my apartment, but ultimately, Luna is the one who should put a stop to things. I'm fine with her being in love, but her boyfriend should have boundaries and not enforce them. Maybe spend more time in his apartment together, or at least not try to tell me what to do. Luke isn't on the lease. Update 1. I don't know if you remember me, but I posted here a few months ago. I'm the person having issues with my roommate's boyfriend, who unofficially moved out. No, this won't be a good update to give you. Things don't seem to be improving at all. In fact, things got a little better, then got worse again. Let me explain. A few days after my post, Luna still hadn't spoken to me because I'd yelled at her boyfriend. The tension was so thick I felt like I could cut it with one of those expensive Japanese knives Luke always recommends for a good vibe in the kitchen. I know I made a mistake exploding like that, but that's what happens when you try to let your partner know, and they either don't listen or downplay it. It's not that I like yelling at people, but I also know I'm not necessarily the bad guy here. Some of you told me Luna should have realized it wasn't okay for him to be here all the time, since we moved out and we're both on the lease. To those who criticize me for not telling Luna loud and clear that I wasn't okay with her boyfriend living here all the time, I'll tell you that I did. But if they're like Luna, what I said went in one ear and out the other. I also read a comment calling me jealous or saying I wanted their boyfriend for myself. I don't want Luke for myself. He's not my type of guy. I don't want to be in a relationship where she tells me my book on the nightstand is ruining the feng shui. I'm glad for her that Luke isn't the type of guy she used to date. Because even though he's annoying, he's way better than the ones before, which says a lot. I'd just like a few more boundaries. I wouldn't even mind so much if she stayed in the house for a few days. Just try to establish boundaries, as if she'd lived here her whole life. I've tried talking to Luna, but she just ignored me, until a week ago, when she suddenly knocked on my door. She looked like she'd just stopped crying, and I assumed the worst. I asked her if she'd broken up with Luke, and she smiled a little and said, "No, you wish you had." Then I smiled and told her I was about to buy some champagne, and she laughed. I asked her what had happened, and she told me that for the past few days, she and Luke had been fighting. It turns out that after realizing everything I was feeling, she thought about it, and felt really bad for not having realized it sooner. She told me she had no idea how selfish she was being, that she was only thinking about herself. In fact, she stood up for me and told Luke that they were both being too much and that it wasn't my fault at all. Well, Luke realized that she was going to refuse to admit that they had done anything wrong, so they've been arguing about it. She just refuses to put all the blame on me, but he eventually gave in. That made things much better between her and me. I hugged her, and we patched things up. Then she told me that Luke wanted to talk to me, to apologize, and to try to make things right with his girlfriend's friend because he really cared about Luna. So, the next day, Luke came and apologized. He told me he was being too annoying to me, and that I deserved a reprimand like I did the other day. After all these apologies and acknowledgments, I apologized for yelling at him, and things got better. He told me that if I could forget what happened lately, things would be better from now on. He told me that from now on I'd be a little more careful not to overstep my boundaries. You see, like I told you, things were actually great for a few weeks, until they got worse than before. A few days ago, Luke told me he needed to talk to me. He told me his apartment was undergoing urgent renovations, and he needed to find a place to stay for more than a month. He told me he'd love to move in for a while, but he obviously wanted my permission, because he didn't want to step on my toes. I thought about it for a moment because, well, you know, while Luna looked at me with her puppy dog eyes. In the end, I said yes. They both jumped for joy, and we really had a fun night together. A week passed, and Luke started his demands again. The list is quite interesting, but one of the funniest things is that he cooks some of my favorite dishes. All because he doesn't like the smell in the apartment, and because he can't eat them because they don't agree with him. They're just tacos, but for him, they're a source of stress. Not only have I not stopped cooking them, but I've even made a special taco night because remembering them makes me hungry, just to annoy him. I'm being petty, but I'm also not going to stand for him playing the sad puppy card and then reverting back to his old self. At this point, I've already spoken with Luna, and I've told him that either he goes or I do. I just informed him, and he has until tomorrow morning to give me his decision. I object, but he said he'd talk to him. In the meantime, I'm working on Plan B, which is to talk to the landlord and ask him to remove my name or Luna's from the lease. Update 2. It's good to have started early on my Plan B, talking to the landlord about changing things in the lease, because my friend wasn't willing to budge. And I'm not one of those people who cuts her off at the first offense from a friend, but I'm not going to wait forever either. So my advice is, always have a Plan B. But at the same time, this was happening. Other things were also happening. What do they have to do with what I've been finding out? After everything that happened last time, I was a little suspicious of Luke's last-minute renovation, because things don't usually work that way. Even a landlord has to give tenants months' notice if he wants to do something. And even if it was Luke's fault, and he did something to cause harm, I'd still have to give him time to get things. And it's not something that happens overnight. The landlord can't just order him to leave and do whatever he wants. I knew where he lived, so I asked around and managed to get in touch with his neighbors. It was really funny. The neighbors hated him, so we ended up making a good connection with the Luke-hating club. The neighbors told me there were no repairs going on, and that Luke was probably lying. In fact, Luke was actually moving out, as he'd almost emptied his apartment. This made me incredibly angry, because it meant Luke was not only lying to both of us, but also planning to stay in our apartment rent-free indefinitely. And if he wasn't lying to both of us, at least he was lying to me. Read on to find out the answer to that. After getting all the information, I was just looking for the right time to tell Luna alone. But since she was always around Luke, I had to wait until later that day. Yesterday, Luna was cooking alone, or so it seemed to me, so I approached, but suddenly, Luke appeared out of nowhere. He stood up, and it turned out he was there, just getting things out of the closet downstairs. I turned around, but I couldn't help but overhear what they were saying. Luna was asking Luke if there was any chance I'd figure out the whole apartment renovation thing. Luke said there was no way I'd dig that deep, and by the time this started looking suspicious, they'd already have done what they were planning to do. She said she felt a little bad for manipulating me these past few months. But when Luke asked her if she'd do it again for him, she just said cheerfully, always. Their plan is to kick me out and take the apartment, which is a stupid plan. It would have been easier to ask me from the start, or even that's what they were planning to do when they got me out of the contract. But there's something about all this, the lies, the manipulation, the malice, that makes me want to do something just to spite them. And you know why they're doing all this, instead of just talking it over with me? Because Luna's jealous of me. Since she's told him, she thinks I stare at him too much. Which is funny, because he's living here, so I don't know what he expects, that I stare at the ceiling every time I walk into a room when he's here. Meanwhile, he seems angry that I disrespected him when I yelled at him that one time. Want to be mean? I can be too. Update 3. Many have said I should just walk away and save myself all the trouble, that I'd become them, and try to get revenge. But I don't seek revenge for the simple satisfaction it brings, but because I'm tired of bad people getting away with it. Don't you hate it when someone jumps the line at the grocery store? Do you just let them because you don't want any more trouble? I hate entitled people. If the person I thought was my friend had told me she wanted to move here with her boyfriend and told me to let her, I wouldn't have had a problem. But manipulation just because she thinks I'm jealous is what hurts me the most. A week ago, after returning from work, I went straight up to the roof because I didn't even want to see Luna's face. I just stood there thinking and wasting time on my phone, but as I was going down, I saw Luke go into another apartment 2 floors below us. I knew a couple lived there, but nothing more. I waited about 10 minutes, but they didn't come out, which made me very suspicious. Then I went back to our place and found the apartment empty, so I called Luna and asked where she was. She told me she was working and that Luke was out with his friends. So I decided, okay, I'll do some research. The apartment is owned by a married couple, Indira and John. The husband, John, usually works long hours and comes home late at night, which made me assume I had found something juicy. After confirming that I was 100% sure I was cheating on him, I figured what to do. I had time, because I'd already spoken to the landlord, but he asked me for a few days to sort out the contract. If I were a good friend, I'd have to go tell Luna everything I found out. But Luna wasn't my friend, and I didn't have to tell her anything. But I didn't owe her anything, and if she was the cheating girl at the apartment complex, that wasn't my problem. If she couldn't fit through the door with those big antlers, it was her fault. That's what happens when you think about the one below instead of the one above. For forgetting I was your friend all along. But there was someone who deserved the truth more than Luna, the cheating wife's husband. I had a photo of Luke entering the apartment, so I met with John and told him the truth. He was understandably upset and refused to believe his wife would ever cheat on him. But photos are photos, and even he couldn't explain why Luke was breaking into her apartment in the middle of the day. What's interesting for Luna is that she's about to be evicted from the apartment, and also about to indirectly discover that Luke is being unfaithful. I'd feel bad about it any other time. Now I don't care. Update 4. It took a few days for my neighbor John to do anything with his wife. I don't know if he was in shock or working things out with a lawyer or something. But John finally showed up at their house early and caught them both red-handed. Literally, Luke with his hands in his wife's dough. The two of them in bed, making something that wasn't pizza. I'd say making a baby, but they must have been careful, I suppose. But they were cooking up something. I wasn't there, but I know John wasn't happy. I didn't see this because I was in my apartment, but the neighbors here have told me everything. Yes, it's one of those complexes where neighbors gossip. And with something like this, it was like adding fuel to the fire. John punched Luke several times and kicked him out of the house. He also kicked his wife out and humiliated them both by telling everyone what they had done, shouting, while everyone watched from outside. Luke was scared of what Luna would do when she found out. About 2 hours later, Luna came home and found out immediately, the same way I found out. Luke was hiding in his room, and she nearly broke down the door. I don't know why, but I can't help but imagine him hiding under the bed. He begged her to listen to him because the rumors weren't true, but she refused to listen and kept hitting him over the head. I was in the kitchen. She kicked him out with most of his stuff, which flew out into the hallway, and then she looked at me with those puppy dog eyes and started crying. I felt bad for her, so I decided to give her a chance and become best friends forever again, have a sleepover at night where we could talk shit about Luke and drink ourselves to sleep. No, that's clearly not what happened. Instead, I asked her if there was anything she wanted to tell me, something she'd been hiding from me and wanted to get off her chest. But she played dumb and told me she'd never hidden anything from me. At that moment, I looked at her and said, "Come on, Luna, I know." She continued to act dumb, so I told her, "Look, I've heard everything, and I know what you were up to." She started apologizing to me, saying she made a mistake and wasn't thinking clearly, that she was jealous because things were going so well with him, and it terrified her. I told her that was exactly what Luke had done, and I wasn't forgiving him. Plus, she was jealous of me, even though I hadn't given her any reason to, yet he was cheating on her, albeit with the person she least expected. Then I told her I'd already spoken to the landlord, and that she had a few days to pack up her things and leave, because she'd paid a little more to terminate the old lease and sign a new one with only my name. She told me I couldn't do that to her, not now, because she couldn't be without a place right when she'd lost her boyfriend, much less in the way she did. Then Luna started crying and told me she needed me. I told her I needed her too, but she was the one who betrayed me first. After that, she grabbed all her things and left. She tried to beg me one more time, but I asked her not to even try and told her to never show her face to me again. In fact, I haven't seen or heard from her since. No texts, no calls, and I just hope she leaves me alone. So guys, that's it. I'm currently living alone. Update 5. Because I've been asked for more updates, here's what's been going on over the past month since I got rid of Luna and Luke. John is divorcing his wife, and I don't know where she is at the moment. There are rumors among the neighbors, but rumors from people who like to drink a little. They're the kind who say his wife is now dating a drug dealer and all that. But if they talk about Luke, the only thing he was dealing was neurons outside his head. I know a few things about Luke, like that he tried to move back to where he used to live, but neither the neighbors nor his landlord wanted him there. I don't know why he has a problem with smells, but a lot of his problems living there were because he couldn't stand it when a neighbor was cooking. After that, I've lost track of him. I don't know anything, and my friend never wrote me anything, which I appreciate. At least she's been a good friend and realized that stalking me wasn't going to get me anywhere. She moved back to her hometown with her parents, and from what I understand, she's depressed about everything that's happened. Otherwise, everything's cool. I've increased my weekly taco nights to 3 times, and now I can watch all the series I want without waiting for Luna to join us. If you have any recommendations, especially ones that go well with taco nights, I'll be reading them. My mother-in-law demanded a say in our finances, so I let her fund her daughter's divorce. I'm using a disposable account because my ex and his mother occasionally browse Reddit. My wife and I were married for 4 years, but things will soon be very different. We had a decent life together. We weren't rich by any means, but we were comfortable enough with a modest house and some savings. We both worked full-time and split expenses fairly evenly, although I handled most of the financial planning. The problem wasn't our finances. The problem was my mother-in-law. From day one, she made it very clear that I wasn't good enough for her precious daughter, that she deserved so much more. She resented my career because I wasn't going to provide for her the way she needed, or when I was going to buy her a house in a better neighborhood. I would ask my wife if she was okay with all this, and she would always say, "That's just how mom is," while trying to keep the peace. But over the past year, my mother-in-law's meddling has reached a new level. I know her previous meddling was already very high, but this year it was worse. She became obsessed with our financial decisions. At first, they were innocent, so-called innocence-inducing questions about our savings and investments, nothing too far removed from what he'd already gotten us used to. Then it escalated to outright criticism about how we spent our money. This escalated until the day he showed up at our house unannounced one weekend. My wife and I had just finished arranging some new furniture we had bought on sale. We were proud of the deal we had gotten, because the furniture was good and had been cheap. My mother-in-law came in, looked around with a disgusted expression and said, "You guys really need to learn the difference between being cheap and being frugal." He spent the next hour pointing out everything wrong with our purchases. The coffee table was poor quality, the sofa wouldn't last more than 2 years, and apparently, we should have consulted him before spending money on such junk. I asked my wife, without my mother-in-law overhearing, if anyone had consulted her when they bought her mother, but she just stood there, uncomfortable, but without saying anything to defend our decisions. After she left, I asked my wife why she never stood up to her mother. She just shrugged and said it wasn't worth the fight. A few weeks later, we had dinner at my mother-in-law's house. I don't know how we got from talking about politics, which was a less controversial topic at that table, to somehow my mother-in-law's territory. My mother-in-law steered the conversation to my wife's cousin, who had just bought a new house in a very nice, but extremely expensive neighborhood. One of those where each house costs $1 million or maybe more. Perhaps where only politicians can afford to buy. And that's why my mother-in-law made the connection. She went on and on about how smart her cousin was with his investments, and how his wife would never have to worry about money. I could sense the implicit criticism when I mentioned that we were actually saving aggressively for our future goals instead of taking on a giant mortgage. She responded with a laugh. "No offense, but you clearly don't understand how to build wealth. If you'd let someone with experience guide you, my daughter wouldn't be living in a squalid house 5 years from now." My wife, as usual, said nothing. I told her the house wasn't bad, since it cost over $300,000. We just weren't going to go into debt just 3 times that amount just so she'd feel good when she came to visit. I even told her the house serves a double purpose if that's the case. The following week, my wife showed me her phone. Her mother had sent her links to financial advisors, specifically her own, who had supposedly helped several family friends secure their future, and also to get a commission for my mother-in-law, because she's not the type to do things selflessly, so there was definitely something in it for her. The messages became increasingly insistent, with the mother-in-law demanding that we meet with her advisor. It was the first time my wife had ever weighed in on this. "I'm getting tired of this. It won't stop." We decided to stand our ground. I'd take care of her if she brought up the subject again. We didn't need some random advisor she knew, especially since I suspected this person would just report everything to my mother-in-law. But she wasn't one to take hints. He called me directly a week later, bypassing my wife. "I've been thinking about my daughter's financial future," and he said it without even a hello. "I want you two to set up a joint investment account that I can monitor. I need to protect my daughter's interests because men often leave her with nothing." I responded clearly that our finances were none of his business, and that my wife worked and had her own money, so he should worry more about her than us. We were adults who managed our money perfectly well. His response was, "Well, if you feel that way, Maybe you need to reconsider my daughter's position in my will. I can't leave money with people who won't handle it properly." I know he was hoping I'd say something, doubt him, or whatever, but I hung up. When I told my wife about the call, she was upset. But here's the thing. She wasn't angry with her mother, but with me for being rude. We had our first real argument about her mother's intervention in our lives. She kept saying I should have been more diplomatic, that her mother meant well, and that maybe we should consider her advice just to keep the peace. I asked her if she was worried about peace or her inheritance. She insisted no, that she just wanted peace in her life. However, instead of having peace, when I told her mother to bury her opinions in her belly button, I didn't say that place. I was defending her. She wanted peace with her mother, not with her husband, whom she lived with. A week later, my mother-in-law showed up at our door with a man in a suit. It turned out to be her financial advisor friend. You might think that if he came to rob us, like many of these people do, he'd come wearing a ski mask. But there are people in suits robbing charity events to line their pockets all the time. So it wasn't much different. And here my mother-in-law needed a lot of charity, because she has very serious boundary and mental issues. Because I was really expecting us to sit right there and go over our finances with this stranger. When I refused to let him in, he caused a scene right at our door with the guy standing next to him. Judging by his rather surprised expression, I don't think this was the first time, so you can imagine the kind of business he does. It's like not flinching while watching someone soften up a guy with a baseball bat. If that's the case, it's because this isn't his first mafia-style business. The neighbors were definitely watching the show. Finally, my wife found her second wind and told her mother to leave. My mother-in-law looked shocked, as if she couldn't believe her daughter would stand up to her. She left, but the barrage of messages that followed was incredible. According to her, we were ungrateful, foolish, and destined for financial ruin. The situation worsened when my wife's brother called to warn us that my mother-in-law was questioning all the siblings about our financial situation and spreading rumors that I was financially controlling my wife. It was clear we needed to take more drastic measures to set boundaries. That's when I had my epiphany. Since she wanted so desperately to be involved in our finances, why not give her exactly what she wanted, but on our terms? I had discussed a plan with my wife. She was hesitant at first, but agreed that it might be the only way to handle her mother. So I called my mother-in-law and told her we'd reconsider her offer to help us with our finances. I told her we'd like to set up a special account where she could contribute if she wanted to get involved. She was delighted, immediately agreeing to meet with us. When she came, I had all the paperwork ready for what I called a family emergency fund. I explained that this account would be for unforeseen family emergencies only, and that we appreciated her desire to help us secure our future. My mother-in-law was so excited to finally get what she wanted that she signed the documents without reading the details. What he didn't realize was that the account was set up so that, although he could deposit money, he couldn't withdraw anything without my wife's and my approval. The terms clearly stated that any contribution would be considered a gift to the marital estate and would be used solely at our discretion for genuine family emergencies. He immediately transferred $25,000 into the account. I was surprised by the amount, but it confirmed what I'd always suspected. His desire to control our finances wasn't to help us. It was about maintaining power over his daughter. Exactly what he accused me of. Over the next few weeks, my mother-in-law continued sending investment advice and asking for account statements. I kept the information vague, telling her only that her contribution was growing safely. She seemed quite satisfied and even added another $10,000, saying we needed to diversify. At that point, I began to notice changes in my wife's behavior. She started staying late at work and being vague about her schedule. At first, I thought she was just stressed about the situation with her mother, but something didn't feel right. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone kept buzzing with notifications. I normally wouldn't check her phone, but given how she'd been behaving, I checked the screen. There were several messages from someone named Mike. The preview showed enough to know this wasn't just a work relationship. I opened her phone. We knew each other's passcodes and checked her messages. She'd been having an affair with this guy, Mike, who apparently worked in her department. The messages were explicit and made it clear this had been going on for at least 2 months. When she got out of the shower, I confronted her with the phone. She tried to take it away from me, then burst into tears when she realized I'd already seen everything. She admitted to the affair, claiming she felt suffocated in our marriage and needed some excitement. I told her to pack her bags and leave. She seemed shocked, as if she expected me to beg her to stay or something. When she realized I was serious, she started crying harder, saying it was just a mistake and she'd finish it immediately. I didn't care if she didn't finish it right away. She shouldn't have started. I'd spent years dealing with her mother's disrespect, and now this was over. I told her she had an hour to gather her essentials and leave. She could arrange to get the rest of her things later. She moved temporarily to a friend's house. She called me repeatedly over the next few days, begging for another chance. I stood my ground and told her I was contacting a divorce lawyer. She threatened to tell her mother I was stealing her money if I went through with the divorce. I told him, "Go ahead. Explain to your mom how her precious emergency fund is going to pay for your divorce after you cheated on me. I'd like to see her face when I tell her, but she can live with this too." The call with my divorce lawyer was quite productive. He informed me that my wife had already consulted with 3 of the best divorce lawyers in the city. It was a classic tactic, consulting with the best lawyers only to have conflicts of interest and be unable to represent me. Fortunately, I found an excellent lawyer who wasn't on his list. He explained to me that she would likely try to claim half of our assets, including the emergency account, from her mother. But this was a fault-based estate, so we weren't going to split everything equally. That's when I revealed my plan for my mother-in-law's money. My lawyer actually smiled and said, "Well, that's an interesting way to handle domineering mothers-in-law." My mother-in-law had been so determined to have a say in our finances, and now her money was going to fund her daughter's divorce. A divorce caused, moreover, by her daughter's infidelity. I knew the road ahead would be complicated. My mother-in-law would be furious when she found out what was happening to her money. My wife had tried every strategy possible to get as much as she could, but for the first time since this all started, I felt like I had the upper hand. I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. The family emergency fund was about to be used for exactly what it had been intended for, a family emergency, just not the one my mother-in-law had imagined when she signed those papers. Now I'm sitting here, sipping something in celebratory mode. Sometimes karma works in mysterious ways, and sometimes it works out exactly as planned. Update 1. In my last post, I explained how my mother-in-law's obsession with controlling our finances led me to create a family emergency fund, which she enthusiastically funded, only to have it become a resource during the divorce after I discovered my wife was cheating on me. Well, a lot has happened since then, and I thought everyone would appreciate an update. I received the formal divorce papers from my wife's lawyer about a week after my last post. She was seeking half of all his assets, plus alimony. The surprise? Her lawyer was one of the most expensive in the city. I knew I had no way of affording this lawyer on my own, which made me wonder where the money was coming from. My lawyer noticed that my wife had been making small, but frequent transfers from their joint account over the past few months. My lawyer suspected she was stashing money away before the divorce. He told me, "This could be just the tip of the iceberg. I can bring in a financial expert to dig deeper, but it will cost extra." I didn't hesitate. Go for it. If she's trying to hide assets, I want to know. Besides, she's paying for my mother-in-law. While this investigation was going on, my mother-in-law called me, absolutely furious about the divorce. "How dare you do this to my daughter? I demand access to my money right now." I responded, "But that wasn't what you wanted. I don't know if the idiot she was sleeping with was your cup of tea, but there you go. As for the terms of the account you signed, they clearly state that the money can only be withdrawn for family emergencies with both of your signatures. The funds remain there, safe and sound, until a judge orders their division," she yelled. "This is a family emergency. My daughter needs that money for her lawyer." It's interesting that you consider the fact that she needs a divorce lawyer after cheating on me a family emergency. It's so ironic to talk about family and infidelity in the same breath, as if they were intertwined. I replied, "The court will decide how those funds are distributed as part of the marital property." She hung up after a series of insults that I won't repeat here. A few days later, my wife called me, clearly panicking about her attorney fees. "Can't I afford the down payment? Can you release some money from our accounts?" I replied, "All of our joint accounts are frozen during the divorce proceedings. It's standard procedure. And don't think I'm going to pay for you to ruin me in the divorce. I'm also looking for the same thing. You know, they call it a conflict of interest," she said. "What about the emergency fund? We could use some of that, right? It's for emergencies," I replied. "Spreading your legs and the subsequent divorce doesn't qualify as the kind of emergency your mother had in mind when she set up the fund. Besides, any withdrawal requires both of our signatures, remember?" She started crying, claiming she didn't have any money for anything. I reminded her I had a job and suggested she find a more affordable lawyer. The next day, my mother-in-law showed up at my workplace. She caused such a scene that security had to escort her out. She was screaming that I was stealing her money and that she needed to release the funds so her daughter could pay for the divorce. My coworkers were shocked, but honestly, I was just embarrassed for her. The financial expert my lawyer hired was worth every penny. He discovered that my wife had a secret account where she had been hiding money for almost a year, long before I discovered her affair. She had managed to save more than $30,000 that she hadn't disclosed during the divorce proceedings. My lawyer was delighted with this discovery. You know, lawyers love to find something to sue for. Sometimes they're bastards, but today, and this one in particular, is a real sweetheart. She has the right to continue using her salary, but not to declare assets during the divorce proceedings. That's hiding marital property and perjury. The judge won't take this lightly. I had to fight the urge to call her out and brag about catching her. Instead, I let it all play out in court. When my lawyer presented the evidence about the hidden account, my wife turned red. The judge immediately ordered a freeze on her hidden account. Between that and the already frozen joint accounts, she was suddenly without access to significant funds. I found out about all this because she called me that night, crying, saying she couldn't even afford food. She begged me, "Please talk to your lawyer. Get them to unfreeze at least one account. I'm desperate." I told her, "No, I don't see any benefit in doing that. Why would I do that? You've been secretly draining our joint account for a year, while begging the court to give you half of what was left. You tried to rob me, and now you want my help." She said, "I need that money. It's mine too," I replied. "Actually, I've had the bank completely freeze our joint account. Neither of us can access it until the court decides how to divide it. And when they do, I hope it won't be very fair because of your small deceptions, coupled with your larger deception." She started screaming that I was trying to deceive her, that it wasn't legal, and that she would have the bank unfreeze it. I replied, "The bank will only unfreeze it if we both ask for it, and I have no reason to do that. Unlike you, I declared all my separate savings to the court, so I'm not doing anything illegal. You, on the other hand, have proven that you can't be trusted with access to our joint funds." After that, things moved quickly. The judge was not at all impressed with my wife's attempt to hide assets. In the final judgment, I was awarded all the money in our joint account, plus 70% of the funds in her hidden account. Her lawyer managed to argue that some of the hidden money had been saved by her directly, which is why she didn't get 100%. What really upset her was that she was denied alimony. Her lawyer tried to argue in her favor, but the judge pointed out that she had a job and that her attempt to hide assets demonstrated wrongdoing. He was also ordered to pay a fine and reimburse me for the cost of the financial expert who uncovered his deception. I bought my share of the house to stay there. I still think it's a good investment. And the best part was buying my share with my mother-in-law's fund. Thank you, mother-in-law. I've already toasted you. As for the family emergency fund my mother-in-law had established, the judge ruled that it was, in fact, marital property, as it had been awarded to both of them according to the documents my mother-in-law had signed. It was divided equally in the divorce settlement. About 2 months after the divorce was finalized, my ex-wife called me again. She explained that she was having financial problems. The divorce had exhausted her resources, and her friend was growing tired of having her stay. Apparently, her friend had been dropping increasingly obvious hints about when she'd be able to get her own place. She admitted, "I have no way to pay the rent right now. I just need a little time to get on my feet. Could I stay in the house for a while, just until I save up enough for a deposit on an apartment?" She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You've forgotten what a divorce means. We're not together anymore. There's no way you're moving back in, even temporarily," he said. "Where am I supposed to go?" I answered, and Mike, who, for those who don't remember, was his adventure partner, "You can't stay with him." He completely ignored the question, which told me everything I needed to know. Mike had probably lost interest once she was actually available. Typical. "This is all your fault. You stole my savings. I'd have plenty of money if you hadn't taken everything in the divorce," I replied. "The only thief here is you. I'm sorry it went so wrong for you, but I'm not sorry. You tried something. It went wrong, life goes on. The only difference is that mine will continue with money and yours without," she responded, increasingly angry. "You took my emergency fund, my mother's. I need that money back." I told her, "The court already awarded it to me. If you want it back, talk to your lawyer, although I doubt they'll be eager to help you after you lied to them, too." He called me several nasty names after that, and accused me of financial abuse, which was very ironic, coming from someone who had secretly drained our joint account for a year. I told him not to contact me again and hung up. I've decided to have no further contact with her now. She's called several times since then, but I only answered the first time to reiterate that I didn't want to speak to her anymore. A doorbell camera captured her passing by the house once when I wasn't home, but she hasn't returned since. Like my mother-in-law, she'd been telling everyone that I cheated on her and stole her money. My ex-wife's brother actually called me to tell me he didn't blame me for what had happened. He said his mother had always used money to control people, and he thought it was time someone gave her a taste of her own medicine. I'd love to hear from my mother-in-law, but the reality is I don't, and I think it's for the best. That infernal swine must be spewing bile or acid from her mouth, but I don't want to be hit by her. Update 2. I know this is going to make your day, and I want to make your day because I've had a fantastic few weeks since I heard this news. If someone is a little depressed today, they won't be anymore. Remember my mother-in-law's financial advisor? This person was advising her, but about scams. Well, not really, but it sounded good in my head. Whatever it was, he scammed my mother-in-law, my ex, and some of my mother-in-law's friends and family. They were all scammed by the same man, and they all suffered the same fate. I should also say that this person is being sued by my mother-in-law and everyone else involved, and is facing criminal charges. But I'm still in this stable state of happiness, knowing that even if they sue him, they won't get anything back. This guy didn't have everyone's money stashed away in case he ever needed to return it. He spent it. He gave them investment advice that made him a profit, and while he pocketed the commissions, the victims lost their savings. My mother-in-law lost nearly $175,000, but the total scam is worth more than $1 million. My ex also invested his money in the scam, but in his case, it was only $5,000. That's all she could save to convince my mother-in-law to let her live with her. Apparently, and that's what I know, she told her that if she thought about her future, saved, and planned well, she'd let her live in her house. But if she was careless with money, she wouldn't. Who's the careless one with money now? But at the same time, some people have decided to sue my mother-in-law for pressuring them to invest with this guy. I'd like to be suing too, because my mother-in-law is the one being sued, but not so much that I lose my savings. I don't know where all these lawsuits will end up, but this is one of the best things I've ever heard. It couldn't be better. Editing has improved. My mother-in-law had to sell her house to compensate her friends and family. No one could recover all the money they'd lost to the scammer, so my mother-in-law had to sell her house to compensate them, even though it wasn't enough. It's been crazy. A mother at my son's daycare center became obsessed with my husband and began stalking us. She moved into the building next door and tried to break into our apartment. My husband, Mariel, 34, and I, 32, have been married for 6 years and have a 3-year-old son, Everett. We live in a city where housing prices are sky high, so we were lucky to find a decent apartment in a good neighborhood with a good daycare nearby. We enrolled Everett there last year, and until recently, everything was going well. Mariel and I value our family time very much. We both work demanding jobs. I'm in healthcare administration, and he's a civil engineer at a reputable firm. Despite our busy schedules, we make sure to drop Everett off and pick him up together whenever possible. It's our special family routine that gives us valuable time together before we begin our separate workdays. Daycare is pretty typical. Parents rush in and out, most barely greeting each other beyond a quick nod or a brief hello. That's why Diana's behavior stood out from the start. Diana has a daughter, Liv, in Everett's class. I noticed her about 6 months ago when she started looking at me strangely during my morning drop-off. At first, I thought maybe I had something on my face or had accidentally offended her. I tried smiling and saying hello a few times, but she always gave me a cold stare or ignored me completely. After several attempts, I gave up and focused on Everett. Things took a strange turn about 2 months ago. Mariel had to leave Everett alone because I had an early meeting. That night, she came home with a strange story. Diana, who had never spoken a word to me despite numerous opportunities, had struck up a very enthusiastic conversation with him. In the span of about 10 minutes, she told him her entire life story, where she was from, where she went to college, details of her divorce, her husband leaving her for a co-worker, and how unhappy she was with her job and living situation. When Mariel mentioned that she was a civil engineer, Diana acted as if he were a celebrity. She asked him a ton of questions about his firm and the projects he was working on. Mariel, being naturally friendly and trying to be polite, mentioned that I had also attended the same university around the same time as Diana, thinking that might help smooth over any issues she had with me. I laughed, joking that Diana had basically speed dated my husband in the nursery hallway. We didn't think much more about it, considering her simply a socially awkward person. The following week, Mariel traveled for a project presentation. I took charge of dropping him off and picking him up alone for 10 days. Every day, Diana would somehow appear next to me in the hallway or waiting room. She never spoke to me or acknowledged my presence, but she would position herself close enough to overhear my conversations with teachers or other parents. Several times, I caught her leaning in slightly when I was talking to another mom about weekend plans or activities for the kids. The behavior was so strange that I mentioned it to Mariel during our nightly calls. She found it odd that Diana didn't even try to talk to me, especially after being so quick to engage him. When Mariel returned from her trip, we went back to our routine of dropping Everett off together. 3 days after her return, Diana walked into the classroom as Mariel was adjusting Everett's backpack in his cubby, and I was across the room helping Everett hang up his coat. Diana walked straight up to Mariel, grabbed her arm, and excitedly asked how her trip had been and if she was happy to be back. Mariel, surprised by her familiarity, immediately pointed at me and introduced us. Diana looked at me with a strange expression and claimed she remembered me from seeing her at a homecoming event months earlier. This was a blatant lie, not only because we interacted at daycare, but also because I hadn't attended a homecoming event in years. From that day on, Diana's behavior became even more blatant. When Mariel and I arrived at daycare together, she would greet him enthusiastically while completely ignoring me, even though we were clearly together, often holding hands or with Mariel's arm draped over me. Several times, she would linger near the door during pickup time, obviously waiting for an opportunity to speak with Mariel alone. Mariel quickly picked up on her behavior and began deliberately avoiding her. She either pretended not to see her or gave a quick, polite nod before walking away. She told me she found her behavior toward me disrespectful in our marriage, and she wanted nothing to do with her. Despite Mariel's obvious disinterest, Diana persisted. The situation began to affect my enjoyment of our family routine. I found myself scanning the hallway for her when we arrived, tensing when I saw her, and rushing Everett throughout the morning just to avoid another awkward encounter. One afternoon, while chatting with another mom during pickup about an upcoming birthday party, I mentioned our address to coordinate carpooling. Diana was sitting at a nearby table, pretending to help her daughter with an art project, but I noticed her head tilt slightly in our direction when I mentioned our street name. At the time, I thought nothing of it. A month later, I was walking with Everett toward the park near our apartment when I saw Diana and her daughter coming out of the building next to ours. I stopped dead in my tracks, and Diana saw me. She looked equally surprised for a moment, then quickly turned around and hurried off in the opposite direction. When I told Margil about the encounter, he called the leasing office in our building, which is the same one next door, on speakerphone. The manager confirmed that Diana had moved into the adjacent building 3 weeks earlier. The coincidence seemed too great to ignore. The frequency of our encounters increased dramatically. Now I saw Diana almost every day in our neighborhood, at the grocery store, the coffee shop, the park. Each time, she completely ignored me while making obvious efforts to position herself where Margil could see her if she was with us. Things reached a breaking point last month when Diana approached Margil outside our building one morning as he was loading Everett into the car to take him to daycare. I was upstairs, looking for a lunchbox I had forgotten, and watched from the window as Diana tried to strike up a conversation with Margil. Even from a distance, I could see that Margil's body language was tense and uncomfortable. When I came down with the lunchbox, Diana quickly stepped away, but not before I heard her suggest a weekend playdate with just him and the kids. Margil immediately told her that any playdate would have to be arranged through me. Diana never followed up. That night, Margil and I had a long conversation about the situation. We both felt that Diana's behavior had crossed the line from merely annoying to truly concerning. The fact that she had moved so close to us after hearing our direction, combined with her persistent attempts to interact with Margil while excluding me, raised serious red flags. We decided it was time to address the situation directly. The next morning, when we saw Diana, Margil calmly told her I wanted to talk to her. When Diana acted surprised, he added that her pattern of ignoring me while I sought her attention was obvious and respectful. I then went ahead and told Diana directly that her behavior was inappropriate and asked her to keep her distance from our family. I pointed out that a daycare center wasn't a place for dating and that her actions were making us uncomfortable. Diana looked surprised. She claimed there had been a misunderstanding, that she had just happened to be walking with Margil to her office one day after a chance meeting. When I repeated this to Margil later, he clarified that he had walked in the same direction for a block after dropping off at daycare before saying goodbye and heading toward his office. He said he would never bring a stranger to his workplace and had simply been polite during their brief shared walk. A few days after our confrontation, Diana approached us during pickup, saying she wanted to talk. Margil excused herself, saying she needed to focus on Everett. I spoke briefly with Diana, and she angrily told me we wouldn't be friends. Coming from someone who had never made the slightest effort to be friendly with me in the first place, the statement was absurd. I simply thanked her for the information and walked away, leaving her standing there, mouth agape. The current situation remains tense. Diana still lives in the building next to ours, and her daughter continues to attend daycare in Everett. Margel and I now regularly talk about the possibility of moving, something we had considered before, but now feel is more urgent. We have also informed the nursery director about the situation, providing a documented record of Diana's behavior. Several friends have suggested that Diana's actions resemble bullying, which terrified us. We started taking precautions, varying our routes, being more careful about sharing personal information, and keeping detailed records of all interactions with Diana. The nursery's Christmas party is coming up next week, and based on last year's event, where Diana arrived in an inappropriately revealing outfit and spent the evening trying to talk to other children's parents, we're dreading another awkward encounter. Has anyone been through a similar situation? Any advice on how to handle this in the future would be greatly appreciated. I want to protect my family and maintain our peace of mind without escalating the conflict. Update 1. The daycare Christmas party turned out to be even more awkward than we anticipated. Diana appeared in a tight red dress, more suitable for a cocktail party than a children's event. Throughout the evening, she positioned herself wherever Mariel went, even following him to the refreshment table when he went to get a cookie for Everett. Mariel stayed close to me the entire time, making it clear we were a unit. What happened next was unexpected. Another parent from the daycare, Brian, approached us during the party and asked if Diana had been bothering us. Brian revealed that Diana had displayed similar behavior toward him the previous year, when his wife was away due to a health problem. According to Brian, Diana repeatedly sought him out, ignored his wife on the few occasions she was present, and even suggested outings for single parents. The behavior stopped when Brian's wife recovered and began regularly attending school events. We can see that Diana's obsession is nothing new, but unlike Brian, she continues to obsess over my husband despite my presence, which isn't anything new either, because Brian introduced us to two other couples who had had similar experiences with Diana. One mom mentioned that Diana had even shown up at her husband's workplace by chance, after hearing him mention it during a school event. With this new information, we arranged a meeting with the daycare director the following week. We brought Brian, who had already mentioned Diana's behavior to the principal, but had been told it was a personal matter between parents. Now, with several families reporting similar concerns, the principal agreed to monitor the situation more closely and ensure that Diana was never assigned to volunteer with Mariel or the other affected parents. For about 3 weeks after this meeting, Diana seemed to relax. He stopped waiting at pickup times and kept his distance at events. We thought maybe the increased supervision from the daycare staff had had an impact. Then, one night in late January, I was working late, and Mariel picked Everett up alone. When they didn't return home at the usual time, I texted Mariel. He called me back immediately, sounding stressed. He explained that Diana had followed him and Everett home from daycare, first walking behind them, then driving ahead, rolling down the window, and offering them a ride home because it looked like it was going to rain. Mariel firmly declined the offer and took a detour to a public place, a busy coffee shop, until she was sure Diana had left. We decided to file a police report. The officer who took our statement explained that, although Diana's behavior was concerning, it still didn't meet the legal threshold for harassment in our state, which seemed ridiculous, because it's as if the threshold only crossed when she'd chase you dressed as a clown and wielding a knife. The situation escalated again in February, when Diana somehow obtained Mariel's work email and sent her several messages asking for her professional opinion on some personal hobby projects. The emails included photos of the interior of her apartment, with some strange models, and requests for Mariel to come to her home to give her advice. Mariel forwarded the emails to her company's Human Resources Department and responded only once with a firm message, asking her not to contact him again for matters unrelated to the daycare. During this time, we noticed that Diana frequently showed up at places we used to visit. Our usual supermarket, the coffee shop where Mariel often worked on weekend mornings, and even at the trail where I ran several times a week. Each time, she acted surprised to see us, saying she had only recently discovered those places. The most disturbing incident occurred in early March. Mariel and I attended a benefit dinner for the Everett Daycare Center at a local restaurant. The event was adults only and required tickets purchased weeks in advance. In the middle of the night, Diana arrived, saying she just decided to support the school, even though she hadn't confirmed her attendance or purchased a ticket in advance. She spent the entire evening trying to insert herself into conversations with Mariel, complimenting her outfit and asking about her current projects. What really unsettled us happened as we were leaving. Diana approached Mariel while I was gathering our coats and slipped a note into her pocket. Mariel didn't notice until we got home. The note contained Diana's phone number and the message, "Life is short. Seize what could be. She doesn't have to know." Mariel showed me the note immediately, and we agreed that this crossed a definitive line. The next day, we returned to the police station with the note, the email evidence, and the security footage. The officer who had taken our original report agreed that Diana's behavior had escalated to harassment and helped us apply for a temporary restraining order. The court granted the order, requiring Diana to stay at least 30 meters away from us, our home, and Mariel's workplace. The order didn't prevent her from taking her daughter to daycare, but it did specify that she avoid contact with us during our child's drop-off and pickup times. When Diana was served with the restraining order, she apparently went hysterical, thinking we were ruining her life with what we were doing. She told the order server that Mariel had seduced her and given her signs of interest, a complete lie that Mariel vehemently denied. The day after Diana received the restraining order, the daycare director called us. Diana had contacted the school, claiming we were harassing and attacking her. The principal, already aware of the entire situation, assured us that the school supported our actions and would work to ensure the restraining order was respected on daycare premises. Currently, we are in a tense, wait-and-see situation. Diana has technically complied with the restraining order, but we still see her because she lives next to us, and that apparently isn't covered by the restraining order. She's started dropping her daughter off at daycare much earlier than necessary, presumably to avoid running into us. The whole situation has put a considerable strain on our family. Everett has noticed the tension and asked us several times why Lee's mom seems angry with us. We tried to explain to him in an age-appropriate way that adults sometimes have disagreements, but it's difficult to completely shield him from the situation. We're now actively house hunting, hoping to move before the next school year starts. In the meantime, we're documenting every potential violation of the restraining order and maintaining close communication with the daycare staff. I never imagined that a simple routine of dropping the kids off at school would evolve into this level of stress and worry. We're trying to maintain normalcy for Everett's sake, but the constant vigilance is exhausting. I'll update again if there are any major developments. Update 2: a little over a month after obtaining the restraining order, we noticed that Diana had stopped showing up in our neighborhood altogether. Her daughter was still attending daycare, but Diana's mother started taking over. We cautiously hoped this meant Diana had finally gotten the message. At the end of April, we received a call from the daycare director informing us that Diana had withdrawn her daughter from daycare, citing a hostile environment. Although we felt terribly for the child, who had made friends and was well adjusted to her routine, we couldn't help but feel relieved. 2 weeks after Diana's daughter left daycare, Mariel came home from work visibly shaken. A colleague had shown her a social media post from Diana that contained references to our situation. Although it didn't mention us directly, the post described a handsome, married civil engineer who had been friendly with her before his jealous wife intervened. The post said they had shared meaningful conversations and emotional connections that his wife had misinterpreted. It included vague details about our neighborhood and the Everett Daycare Center that were identifiable to anyone who knew us. Several of Diana's friends commented, offering sympathy and suggesting that Diana was clearly insecure and threatened by her. Mariel immediately contacted our lawyer, who advised us to take screenshots of everything, but not to interact. The post, although inappropriate, didn't technically violate the restraining order, as it didn't involve direct contact. The situation took another turn when I received a social media friend request from a name I didn't recognize. Out of an abundance of caution, I checked the profile before rejecting it and discovered it belonged to Diana's ex-husband. After consulting with Mariel and our lawyer, I accepted the request, which was quickly followed by a message stating that he could help us with our situation. He therefore asked us to meet to discuss these issues in person. Thomas turned out to be a calm man who seemed genuinely concerned about the situation. He explained that Diana had displayed similar obsessive behavior toward him during their marriage, often fixating on male colleagues or friends. According to Thomas, Diana's fixations often lasted several months before she moved on to someone new. The most surprising revelation came when Thomas shared that Diana's pattern of moving near her targets was familiar to him. After their separation, but before their divorce was finalized, Diana had rented an apartment in the same building as a colleague Thomas suspected she was interested in. When that didn't work out, he moved into a house on the same street as his therapist, with whom he became obsessed. Thomas explained that he contacted us because Diana had recently contacted him asking to reconcile. During their conversation, She mentioned being forced to leave her apartment due to harassment from neighbors. Thomas connected the dots based on the details Diana had shared, and with some research at his stepdaughter's daycare, he found us. Yes, Liv isn't his daughter, which is why he doesn't have custody. Diana has been diagnosed with erotomania. When I looked it up, I discovered it's a delusional psychiatric condition that causes a person to believe another human being is in love with them, even though it's not true. She was being treated for it by her therapist until she began obsessing over him and stalking him. With this new information, we returned to court to request that the temporary restraining order be made permanent. The judge, after reviewing the evidence, including Thomas's statement and the therapist's statement, granted our request and expanded the order to include prohibitions on any reference to us on social media. Just when we thought the situation might be resolving, our real estate agent called with bad news. While showing our apartment to potential buyers, we had finally found a new home and listed our apartment. She discovered someone had trespassed on our property. Nothing was stolen, but several items had been moved, and a framed photo of Mariel Leverett was missing from the living room. We immediately suspected Diana and contacted the police. They increased patrols in our area. All of this proved invaluable just 3 days later, when Diana was caught trying to gain access to the back entrance of our building at 2 a.m. The police arrested her for violating the restraining order and attempted burglary. Diana spent 2 nights in jail before being released on bail with an electronic bracelet and strict conditions, including a mandatory psychological evaluation and treatment. Her lawyer argued that she was experiencing a mental health crisis and needed help rather than punishment. We have since moved to our new house in a different neighborhood and enrolled Eberet in a new daycare for the upcoming school year. We've taken extensive precautions with our new address, ensuring no public records appear, and instructing friends and family not to share our location with anyone. The most recent development occurred last week, when Diana's attorney contacted ours with a settlement offer. In exchange for us not pursuing civil charges for harassment and emotional distress, Diana would agree to receive ongoing psychiatric treatment, move to another state where her sister lives, and maintain no contact with our family in any way. After much discussion, we have tentatively agreed to these terms, provided that legal safeguards are implemented to ensure compliance. Our primary goal has always been to protect our son and regain our peace of mind. We are cautiously optimistic that this chapter is closing, but we remain vigilant. It's hard to imagine someone as unbalanced as Diana being able to get her life back on track. Update 3. Diana's agreement was finalized approximately 5 months ago. She moved closer to her sister, entered an intensive psychiatric treatment program, and has maintained no contact with us. Diana's lawyer provides monthly updates to our attorney, confirming her compliance with the terms of our agreement. As long as she doesn't violate them, we won't take legal action, but if she does, we can take action fairly quickly. Those are the conditions. According to these updates, Diana has been diagnosed with several mental health conditions in addition to the erotomania her ex-husband mentioned. She is responding well to treatment and medication, and her sister reports significant improvement in her behavior and thought patterns. Our new home has become the sanctuary we had hoped for. Located in a gated community with good security, it's about 30 minutes from our previous neighborhood. Everett has adjusted well to his new daycare and has already made several friends. We've been careful not to share personal information with other parents, although that caution will likely stay with us for many years to come. Mariel's firm was understanding of the situation and allowed her to work remotely for several weeks during our move and transition. Her colleagues have been supportive, and the incident with Diana's social media post has mostly been forgotten. We had a minor scare about 2 months ago when a woman resembling Diana was spotted near Everett's new daycare. After reviewing the security footage, we confirmed it wasn't her, but someone with a similar appearance. Now, every time we see that same haircut, we think it's Diana. The officer who handled our case gets in touch periodically. He advised us to maintain our security measures for at least a year, even with Diana living out of state. That's why we have cameras around our property and remain cautious with our online presence. Everett, fortunately, seems to have processed the changes in his life without significant trauma. He occasionally asks about his old friends from his previous kindergarten, but he no longer mentions Diana or his daughter. That was one of the things that worried us most. But since he's so young, he moves from one thing to another very easily. For those reading this who may be experiencing something similar, my advice is simple: trust your instincts. If someone's behavior feels wrong or makes you uncomfortable, it's probably problematic. Document everything. Inform the authorities early, even if you can't take immediate action. Build a support network of friends, family, and professionals who understand what you're going through. We were fortunate to have resources that many people don't have: the ability to relocate, access to legal representation, supportive employers, and a strong community around us. We recognize this privilege and are committed to helping others who may face similar situations with fewer resources. As for Diana, I've worked hard to let go of my resentment toward her. Mental health is complex, and while it doesn't excuse harmful behaviors, it does help explain them. I hope she continues to receive the help she needs and rebuilds her life in a healthier direction. Thank you to everyone who offered support and advice throughout this nightmare. You've been more important than you can imagine. Update 4. Diana has become obsessed with my husband again. We don't know why, because until now, she tended to move on to another obsession after several months. But after a few months of therapy and medication, she stopped. When her sister found out, she tried to reason with her, but she ended up running away. Her sister contacted Diana's lawyer, and the lawyer warned us what could happen. Our lawyer also warned her that we could take legal action now. We waited a week after the notice to give the sister time to find her and get her back on treatment. But instead, we discovered she returned to the city and been hanging around our old neighborhood. She wanted to find out everything, including which daycare center we were taking Everett to, but no one told her anything, either because she didn't know or because she'd been warned. A neighbor contacted us and told us what was happening, and that was enough to start a legal case against her. She even tried to go to Marjol's workplace, but she just watched from the outside. Or at least that's what we were told. That someone who looked like Diana had been outside for a while, but at least she didn't do anything, and Marjol made sure not to be seen when she left work that day. In any case, the company has instructions not to let her in. The process was swift, and we've managed to sue her and initiate criminal proceedings against her, all in record time, because she had agreed not to be targeted by them and was receiving and continuing treatment. She didn't, and we did what we had to do. All the trials against her have taken no more than 2 months each and have proceeded almost in parallel. She was taken into police custody as soon as our lawyer informed the authorities, and the lawsuit process began. The latter took a bit longer, but we were able to receive compensation from her, which the judge ordered taken from some of her assets. While she was living with her sister, she wasn't working, but she still had a car and some money saved while she was still a functioning Karen living here. Then another judge ordered her to be sentenced to an institution where she'll receive treatment and help for her condition. But if she decides she doesn't want to be treated unilaterally, at least she won't be able to escape and try something with us or someone else. It's not as if she can avoid treatment there anyway. It's not like she has anywhere to escape to. It's not a maximum security prison, but she's not free to do whatever she wants either. I hope this is my last time writing here. At least she now has several years to spend locked up, and her release will be determined by her willingness to continue treatment and recovery. But at least we know it'll be for a while. Maybe she'll start harassing new people in there, but that's no longer our problem, unless he starts stalking imaginary people, which makes him even more unstable than before, then escapes from that place and begins a series of crimes. But from what we know, as long as the person with his condition, and other existing ones, chooses to get treatment, he can return to a normal life. For those who asked about his daughter, we don't really know. Maybe she's with her sister, or maybe she's staying with her biological father. We don't know that part of her story. I say goodbye to you all, and hope I never have to come back here. My husband divorced me in the hospital because he was disgusted by my disfigured face from the accident. But now the cheater is back on his knees when he discovers my $2 million settlement. About a month ago, my life changed completely in the blink of an eye. I had just finished my shift and was on my way home. As I approached an intersection, nothing out of the ordinary, just waiting like everyone else, a truck crashed into the back of my car. The impact was so severe that I suffered several injuries. Later, I learned the driver had been drinking. I was drunk. And because of someone who can't stop drinking while driving, my life was ruined. To say the crash was serious doesn't even come close to describing it. I ended up with broken ribs, a shattered shoulder, and both legs fractured. The pain was unbearable. And while it wasn't the most painful part, what haunts me the most is what happened right after the accident. My car caught fire. Half my face was burned in the fire, and parts of my body too. I don't think I'll ever forget that smell of burnt skin, which was my own skin. And I only survived because someone was able to get me out of the car quickly. Cars that saw the accident and rescued me in time. I was in so much pain from everything, but they had to get me out of there because the car was on fire, and there was no way to put it out. It was the worst pain I'd ever felt in my life, but they saved my life. I remember feeling like I was on the brink of life and death. When I finally got to the hospital, I could barely stay conscious from the pain. I was drifting in and out of consciousness, the pain clouding everything. I could hear voices, which I think were the nurses and doctors treating me. That's all I remember. Later, when I came to, I didn't know where I was at first. I was so disoriented. My body hurt like I'd been beaten, and I was wrapped in bandages from head to toe. I could barely move, couldn't even turn my head. Then a nurse informed me that they had contacted my husband and that he was on his way. For context, at the time of the accident, my husband was out of town on a work trip, so I assume it took him a while to reach me. When I woke up again, my husband was right next to me. But strangely, he wasn't even looking at me. He was on his phone. I didn't have the strength to say anything, so I waved my hand a little, trying to get his attention. Eventually, he realized I was awake. He told me he'd been informed of what had happened, and that he'd received the call about the accident during a very important meeting with a client. He then seemed disappointed at having to leave that meeting to come see me at the hospital. I don't even know how to explain what I felt. I'd been through hell, I was close to death, and all he could focus on was his phone and his client. He didn't look sad, he didn't seem worried or even upset, as you'd expect someone to be when they see the person they love lying in a hospital bed, considering the severity of their injuries. Instead, he talked about how difficult it had been to find a red-eye flight, and the problems he'd have having to leave in the middle of his work trip. He didn't say this as if he was blaming me, but rather as if he wanted to talk to me about something, to distract me, although it sounded like he was blaming me. I mustered up enough strength to whisper to him that I was in a lot of pain. I was scared, more scared than I'd ever been, and all I wanted was some comfort. So I asked him how bad I looked, hoping maybe he'd soften his tone or say something comforting, anything, but he just shrugged. He said, "Yeah, you look pretty bad. This is going to take a long time to recover from." Then he gestured vaguely around my body. And if that weren't enough, he raised his finger and pointed at my face. He looked at me straight and said, "Have you talked to the doctor about it? Your face looks really bad." He didn't need to sugarcoat things. He didn't expect me to pretend everything was fine, but he did expect a little humanity, a little love. For the next few days, I was completely dependent on the nurses and doctors, and I must say they were very kind. They showed more warmth and compassion than I could have imagined. They checked on me constantly, spoke to me gently, cleaned my wounds, adjusted my pillows, and held my hand when I was scared. Every person who came into my room said the same thing over and over again. "It's a miracle you're alive." And I guess, in a way, it was, looking back, considering the condition I was in, and how close I came to not surviving. Maybe it was a miracle, but at the time, I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel lucky. I felt pretty bad, to be honest. My husband wasn't around much during those first few days. In fact, he disappeared after his initial visit. I didn't even have the strength to ask where he'd gone. I was too busy trying to breathe because he'd burned my airways. Then came the day they were finally going to remove the bandages from my face. I was terrified. I knew I had burns, I knew they were serious, but a part of me kept holding on to the hope that it wouldn't be that bad. Maybe it wouldn't be as bad as I feared. I wanted to be optimistic. My husband deigned to come by for that moment, sitting silently in the corner. As the doctor slowly began to remove the layers of gauze from my face, I watched him. I watched his expression. And when all the bandages were removed from my face, I watched him recoil in disgust. Trying to remain calm, I asked the medical staff if I could have a mirror. I wanted to see my face for myself. And no, there was no miracle in that regard. I looked terrible, I have to admit. There were huge scars across my forehead and cheeks. My skin looked red and burned. I couldn't even look at myself for more than a few seconds before I started crying and pushed the mirror away. The doctor and nurse left silently, giving me space to process it. I turned to look at my husband, and the first thing out of his mouth when the hospital staff left was, "Those scars make you look incredibly ugly." I already knew that. I didn't need to hear from him how bad I looked. I could already see it. I needed comfort. I needed reassurance. I needed someone to tell me, "You're still you. I'm still here." But instead, he was just pulling me down further. That entire day, my husband couldn't even look me in the eye. He kept averting his gaze, avoiding me as if I were too difficult to look at, and he kept telling me that I needed to get plastic surgery as quickly as possible. However, since I'd already had so many surgeries and was on a lot of medication, the doctors made it clear that I needed to recover first. I needed rest, stability, and time. My husband and I were told that cosmetic procedures were the last thing I should worry about at that time. Then, the week I was supposed to be discharged, My husband visited me in the hospital, looking gloomy. I hadn't seen him since the day they took off my bandages, and he called me ugly. Not a call, not a text, nothing. I figured maybe he'd gotten overwhelmed, maybe he needed time. Still, a part of me hoped he'd be there to help me pack, to take me home, at least to try to be there. But the moment I saw his face, I knew something was wrong. He was acting distant, so I asked him what was wrong. He then confessed that he had moved out of our house. I stared at him, stunned, as he continued to say that he had thought about it a lot and wanted us to separate. I just stared at him. For a second, I didn't even understand what he was saying. I was still sitting in a hospital bed, barely able to walk, covered in stitches and scars, and he was telling me he'd already packed up and left. I couldn't believe this man was leaving me, and he was doing it right in the middle of the hospital where I'd spent weeks recovering. I asked him if he was serious, because if it was a joke, it was the worst possible time to make one. But he simply looked me in the eye and said, in a very matter-of-fact tone, that he couldn't continue living with me when I had a face like that. He meant it. He said he'd be traumatized living with me for the rest of his life, that he hadn't signed up for this, and it was too much for him. But we were married, and he'd said yes in front of everyone that he'd be there for me through my illness. I told him that if that's what he thought, then I wouldn't stop him. I wouldn't want to spend the rest of my life with someone who's just now showing me what they're like, and that I hadn't signed up for this either. He told me he was fine with it and appreciated that I wasn't begging him to stay, that this made things easier for both of us, and that it was good that we were both on the same page. My own husband was leaving me because of something he couldn't control, something that happened to me in an accident, something that could have happened to anyone. And here he was, making all of this about his own discomfort, his own fear, and not about what I needed, what I had always needed from him. He also informed me that I would have to find my own way back home, because he wasn't going to take me and was only there to break the news. And after that, he just turned around and walked out of the room, leaving me alone in that hospital. I had no choice but to call a friend for help. She and her husband came to my rescue. They both couldn't believe my husband had decided to leave me at such a horrible time in my life. They drove to the hospital and helped me carry all my things. They took me back home, and I am so grateful for their support. It's been more than 3 months since that day. I'm still recovering from my husband's abandonment. He hasn't contacted me and won't even answer my calls. The only time he contacted me was to tell me he'd filed for divorce and that I'd have to sign the papers soon. Since the accident, I've been trying to focus on recovering. My facial surgery is scheduled for a few weeks. The doctors are optimistic that I'll be fine and that I'll be able to start over. My lawyer has also been working tirelessly on my case. We decided to sue the drunk driver who hit me, who also fled the scene. We also decided to sue the company that employed the driver. It turns out he worked for a large multinational corporation, and we discovered this company had a history of hiring reckless drivers willing to speed just to meet their deadlines. They clearly put profits above people's safety, and that's something I couldn't let go. They were just as responsible for what happened to me as I was. Recently, my lawyer called me with some incredible news. He told me that after much negotiation, we had reached a quick settlement. The company was willing to pay me $2 million. My jaw nearly dropped. I was completely shocked. I was just hoping for something fair, something that could help me pay for the medical bills, the surgeries, and help me rebuild my life in some way. I didn't expect the compensation to be anywhere near that amount. A part of me has been overwhelmed since I found out about this. I don't think I've ever heard that kind of money associated with my name. This settlement is huge, and it's going to help cover a lot. The surgeries, the therapies, the care I still need while I recover. Now, what's happening is that my husband has found out about the settlement, and it seems like everything has changed. Suddenly, he's telling me he misses me. He's telling me that maybe he was too hasty when he decided to leave me. He wants us to forget about the divorce and get back together, of course, as if the news of my lawsuit wasn't a reason to come back. He thinks that now that I have money and my fidelity doesn't bother him, I'll accept him with open arms. Now I'm the one repulsed by his fidelity, but not physically, as a person. At this point, the only thing I want to give him is a divorce. I don't even care what I'll get in it. I just want the $2 million and get on with my life. That's why I've spoken with my lawyer about speeding up the divorce and giving him whatever he's asking for. I mean, it's not like we have a lot of assets, so losing $10,000 or $15,000 isn't going to make a huge difference to my finances from now on. The lawyer said there was no need to rush it, because he's not entitled to this new money. And even if we do rush it, he'll probably want to delay it just to be mean and find a way to get me back with him. He said there's no need to get out of this marriage so quickly, that it's better to wait until I get everything I deserve in the divorce. Do you think I should finalize the divorce as soon as possible anyway? Or be mean and take what's coming to me too? Update 1. For people asking if my husband is cheating on me. And maybe that's why he disappeared from my hospital room and was so hasty in leaving me. I guess it makes sense. At first, I didn't even consider that possibility. I never suspected any of it. I never checked his phone or went through his things because I trusted him. Or at least, I thought I did. But now, with everything he's been through, some of the things he did, especially his behavior when I was in the hospital, are making me wonder if maybe there's more to the story than I originally thought. I mean, the way he disappeared from my hospital room, the way he didn't even bother to be by my side when I was at my lowest, it just doesn't make sense. He was so quick to abandon me when I needed him most, so eager to break up without thinking about how much it would hurt me. And then, suddenly, after everything that's happened, and with the compensation agreement, he acts like he wants to be there for me again. Could he have been cheating on me? Was that the reason he was so distant? I don't know for sure, but some part of me can't help but wonder if that's a possibility. I hate to admit it, but it makes sense when I look back on everything he's been through. The way he was always more focused on himself than on us or our life together. It's like, for as long as I remember him, it was always about him. I always expected everything to revolve around him. When we were in a relationship, it was his needs, his desires, his goals that came first. If he was sick or in pain, I would drop everything to be by his side. I took care of him, no questions asked. I was the one there, staying up all night, helping him with whatever he needed. I did everything I could to make sure he was okay, and I always thought that's what a relationship should be like. Mutual care, mutual support. But when it came to me, when I needed him, it was like none of that mattered to him. When I was in the hospital after the accident, he didn't even bother to stay. He couldn't even stay with me for more than a few minutes. He was so cold and distant. I don't even know how to explain it, but I felt like he didn't care. I was going through so much pain, physically and emotionally, and he just walked away. And now he wants back in my life after everything he put me through. After all the times I put him first, after everything I did for him, he wasn't even there when I needed him most. Looking back at all this, I see how selfish that man truly is. It wasn't just the accident. It wasn't just him leaving me in the hospital. It was the fact that, for so long, he was never truly there for me the way I was for him. Throughout our relationship, I was always the one making sacrifices for him, making sure his needs were met, that he was happy. But when it was my turn to need him, when I needed him to be there for me, he wasn't. And that hurts more than anything. I'm only mentioning all this because even if he wasn't being unfaithful, I was still thinking of going through with the divorce. But infidelity could change things in a divorce. And if he was unfaithful, part of me wants to use that to get even. Right now, I'm looking to be meaner. I was happy with my compensation and planned to walk away without any problems. In the end, I'd be leaving with that marriage money, and he'd be eager to get his hands on it. I'm not stupid. I've spoken with asset managers, and it's enough to keep me from having to work for the rest of my life. Imagine a person having a lottery ticket in front of them, lying in a hospital bed, and telling them they don't want it because it looks ugly, and that they want a divorce. It's like breaking it, which is why they're so desperate. But if he was unfaithful, it makes things even worse. And now that I've reduced my pain medication a bit, and I don't feel so numb, I can think clearly enough to make him pay. I even think it doesn't matter if he cheated, I'm still going to get what's fair from the divorce, even though that money means nothing to me and everything to him. Update 2. So I sat down and talked to my husband, or should I call him my ex now? After everything that's happened, I don't know what to refer to him. He's not the man I thought I was going to marry. I told him straight out that I was done with him, that I was going to sign the divorce papers and split everything 50-50. Up to that point, I hadn't discovered any infidelity. He looked shocked when I told him this, as if he couldn't believe what I was saying. He tried to argue with me, telling me he was wrong, that he'd had time to realize his mistakes, and that he wanted to fix things between us. But I didn't want to go back to him. I didn't need him, and he needed me. I told him it would be impossible for me to ever forgive him for the way he treated me in the hospital, for the cruel things he said to me. No husband should ever speak to his wife that way. No husband should ever abandon her when she's at her most vulnerable, especially after a traumatic accident. She was better off without him, and she didn't know how to forgive him, which is why she wanted a divorce. I already knew I didn't want to forgive him, but I was fishing for evidence of his infidelity. I told him that my friends had been thinking that maybe he had been unfaithful to me, which was why he was so emotionally distant from me. That maybe we were having problems in our marriage, and he was already emotionally detached from us. I told him that if he had confessed to me that he was having an affair, and apologized for it, while promising me he'd do what was necessary to fix it, things would be different. Perhaps I would have thought of forgiving him. But he didn't, and that was what hurt me most about him. I was recording the conversation after consulting with my lawyer. It was a long shot that he confessed something, but I had to try. And at first, he hesitated, saying nothing of the sort had happened. But after about 30 minutes, while I seemed hesitant to forgive him, but made him understand that I had my doubts about the infidelity, he confessed. But even though he confessed, I needed proof. I needed him to give me details. And he did. He even showed me his phone, which I was able to take a few screenshots of without him noticing. When I finally had more than I needed, I thanked him because it would be very useful in the divorce proceedings. That's when he exploded. He went from trying to apologize to being downright nasty. He told me he was glad I cheated on him because he was a nasty person even before he saw me this horrible. He said he did what any man would do, and I was asking too much. He also threatened me, saying he wasn't going to let me go that easily. He said if I went through with the divorce, he'd come after my $2 million settlement. He said he was entitled to his share. I didn't find it odd or surprised that he wanted to keep my money, but the way he said it was so vile, so greedy, it sickened me. I was furious. I stood up, shaking with rage, and asked him, "What exactly did you mean? Is it yours? Were you in an accident? Did you burn your face? Do you have scars that will take years to heal? Did you break bones and need multiple surgeries?" He was speaking as if I were entitled to something I hadn't earned. I told him that if he really thought he was owed anything, we'd find out in court. He was furious, but I told him to leave. I didn't want to hear another word from him. I didn't want him in my life anymore. He was just a stranger to me. He wasn't even a person to me. He was something that took up space and stole oxygen. At this point, I know people will think I'm mean for doing this, because infidelity alone can mean an extra $5,000 and a divorce. But for me, and for others who were cheated on or treated like me, which unfortunately are not few, it's $5,000 that he won't keep. And yes, I've been receiving messages from men and women whose partners left them because they lost a leg, were disfigured, or had some other permanent damage. Update 3. Hi everyone. It's been almost 8 months since my last update, and I just wanted to share where I'm at now. First of all, I went ahead with the facial surgery, and I'm happy to say my scars are almost completely healed. There will be marks, but I don't look as horrible, and with some makeup, they can be hidden. It feels like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. The pain and insecurity I was dealing with have slowly faded, and while I'm still recovering emotionally, my physical recovery has been one less thing to worry about. As for my ex, well, we're now officially divorced. In the end, he didn't get a single cent from me, no matter how hard he and his lawyers fought for it. If anything, I received from him, and it wasn't pennies. Honestly, I'm proud of how I stood my ground throughout the entire process. During the divorce proceedings, to make sure I wasn't missing out, I even hired a private detective. What I discovered completely shocked me. It turns out my ex had been having multiple affairs throughout our marriage from the very beginning, and the one he confessed to was the least bad of all. The worst part was that, even when I was in the hospital after my accident, he was with one of his mistresses, because he was having multiple affairs at the same time. Anyway, it was a relief to learn the truth about who he really was. That man wasn't worthy enough to be with someone like me. Since the house we owned together was shared property, we sold it, and I took my share. But at least, I didn't have to split my money, which doesn't include compensation, because we're in a state where fault-based divorce is allowed. And since I earned a little more, I ended up with more money than I would have gotten if we simply split it 50-50ths. It was close to $7,000, but it's even more painful for my ex-husband if we put compensation on the table. Anyway, I currently live alone in a small apartment, which is very cozy and perfect for me. It's part of my new lifestyle. I could buy something luxurious and big, but that would require more money, and I'd have to work. However, all the compensation money is now invested and gives me enough to live on, as long as I don't spend too much. I've also taken on a part-time job, something I enjoy doing, just to fill the days and have something to do, while I spend the rest of the day doing things I enjoy. I'm not completely retired or a millionaire, but I can live and do what I want without worrying about money, something my ex-husband would have liked to have. Update 4. I think fate is cruel because it likes to teach lessons. Lessons that sometimes feel personal. Like if you treat someone badly at the supermarket checkout, someone will treat you badly at work a few weeks later. I've always believed that. So, a car accident with a fire would be the closest thing to giving my ex-husband a taste of his own medicine. But it wasn't exactly like that. My husband had gotten his own apartment after the divorce, just like me. And while he was at work, it caught fire. He wasn't inside, nor was he disfigured by the fire, but he wasn't insured. He's never liked insurance and always thought it was a scam. So there you have it, a burned out apartment that you'll either have to invest a lot of money in or sell for less than the price you paid. As I say, I believe in these things, even though sometimes they're not so obvious. But it's impossible not to think that the fire and personal misfortune are related to what happened to me. The difference is that I didn't deserve to go through that, and he did. Although it could also be an indirect sign that fate wanted me to stay away from him. And since his sign was traumatic, he knew how to make it up to me. Maybe what I'm thinking is crazy, but I'm trying to make sense of everything that happened, even if there isn't any. My cousin's husband wants to physically fight me because I told his wife to stop projecting her miscarriage onto my baby. My cousin Caitlin had a miscarriage last year. She was about 2.5 months pregnant, almost at the end of her first trimester. It was her first pregnancy, and from what I understand, she and her husband, Jack, had just started trying when it happened. It hit her really hard. I mean, she was devastated. She called me, crying so loudly I could barely understand her. She told me she was bleeding, that something was wrong, and that she was scared. I dropped everything and ran to her house. That night, I stayed with her for hours, holding her hand as she cried. She paced and blamed herself. Over and over, she repeated things like, "My body failed me, and I should have done more." I kept assuring her it wasn't her fault, that these things happen more than people talk about, but she wasn't ready to hear any of it. I was spiraling downward. We used to be close, not enough to talk every day, but certainly closer than usual. She was someone I trusted, someone I let go of my plans for. And I did. I was there for her time and time again, especially in those first months after her loss. I brought her groceries, cleaned her kitchen when she didn't have the energy, and always listened. But after the miscarriage, something changed in Caitlin. Every time we talked, she'd come back to her grief, the trauma, motherhood, or some combination of the three. I'm not saying it's wrong to talk about what hurts you, but at the same time, I think there's a limit to how much you can do if you don't want to obsess over it. She started making oddly direct comments when someone else in the family announced something baby-related. They weren't so bad at first, but they got worse when our cousin announced her pregnancy at a small family dinner. Caitlin said it loud enough for everyone to hear. I guess it's easy for some people. She got up and left before dessert. She also became very sensitive. Anything remotely related to babies made her upset. She left our other cousin's baby shower halfway through the celebration and didn't even say goodbye. She once got upset because a diaper commercial came on during family game night. I tried to be understanding. I really tried. Trauma changes people, but it was getting difficult to be around her, having to be careful about what to say and what not to say. She sought professional help, thanks to my advice, but that doesn't seem to be helping. But this is where what I'm telling you becomes about me. I had my baby 2 months ago. Healthy, full term, easy delivery. I'm grateful every day because I've seen how difficult it has been to lose a pregnancy in my cousin. And believe me, I don't take anything for granted. That said, I also made a conscious effort to keep my pregnancy low-key, especially out of respect for Caitlin. I didn't post photos of my baby bump. I didn't have a big gender reveal or even throw a baby shower. I wasn't hiding my joy, but I was cautious. I thought I was doing the right thing, since I knew how much these things hurt my cousin. When the baby arrived, I sent Caitlin a private message with a single photo and a short text. "She's here now, and we're both fine. I hope you're okay too." His response, just one word, was congratulations. I didn't insist. I thought maybe he needed some space. A while later, she asked to come over to my house. I honestly thought it was a good sign. Maybe she was ready to reconnect, maybe even meet the baby. I told him, "Yes, come, we'll keep it quiet." He came with Jack, which I didn't expect, but anyway, I accepted. The visit started well. She held the baby for about 5 seconds before handing him back. Then came the comments. "It must be nice to carry him to term." Don't take this for granted. Not everyone has the opportunity. I hope you really appreciate this because babies don't always survive. And then, the worst part is, sudden infant death syndrome is real. You know, sometimes they just stop breathing, even healthy ones. I froze. Why would anyone say that to a new mother? I was holding my 2-month-old baby when she said it. I looked at her and said, "Caitlin, that's not helpful." She just shrugged and said she was being honest, since she understood the trauma, that she was trying to be strong, even though being around my baby caused her pain. I replied, "So maybe this wasn't the best place for you today." That's when she got that expression on her face, like she couldn't believe I wasn't begging. And then he said, "You'll never understand what it's like to feel your body failing you." That's when I exploded. I said, "I'm sorry for what happened to you. I really am. But that doesn't give you the right to talk about my baby's possible death. She didn't do anything to you. Stop projecting your trauma onto her. I'm not responsible for your pain." He stood up, grabbed his coat, and left. Jack stood back, looking like he wanted to say something. I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "She came to my house and talked about my baby dying. Don't act like I'm the one who crossed the line." He left without another word. But that night, Jack texted my husband, and this is when everything went from sad to surreal. He said, "We need to talk and work this out, man to man. Your wife emotionally attacked my girl while she was trying to be strong. That's not right." My husband's response, "Don't contact us again." Now, Caitlin has blocked me on everything. My aunt, her mother, says I should have been more sensitive, that maybe I could have been gentler. And I responded, "Gentler than what? Letting her talk about infant death while I held my 2-month-old baby?" I was sensitive for a year. I tried hard to accommodate her pain. I skipped celebrations, avoided sharing accomplishments, sat silently with her, and let her cry when no one else was patient. But now I'm told I'm the bad guy because I set a boundary. So here I am, wondering if I handled it wrong, if I went too far, if I should have let it happen. Did I do the right thing? Update 1. I didn't expect them to empathize so much or even genuinely care. Apparently, the consensus is that my cousin was wrong to talk about my baby like that. Anyway, things escalated again. Of course, that was bound to happen. Jack eventually confronted me, or at least he tried. He showed up at my parents' house during Sunday lunch. My parents are in charge of organizing lunches every other weekend. The rest of the Sundays are at other people's houses. That week, I wasn't there. I decided to stay home with the baby because we were finally getting into a routine with naps. My mom told Jack I wasn't there, and apparently that set him off. According to my dad, Jack started yelling in his living room loud enough for people in the kitchen to hear. He said I had emotionally attacked Caitlin and made fun of her pain. He said I had to make peace, or he'd make sure everyone knew what kind of person I really was, even if it meant getting physical. I'm still not sure what that means. No one knows if he was trying to socially threaten me, or if he was just letting off steam, or worse, but either way, my dad wouldn't tolerate it. He told Jack to leave and never come back. My mom called me right after, and she was visibly upset. My dad is more old school and doesn't usually get involved in these things, but even he thought Jack was out of line for talking like that. After that, my phone didn't stay silent for long. I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. Apparently, she sent me a long message about how she was grieving the loss of our relationship, how she never thought I'd reject her when she needed me most, and how she felt completely erased by the birth of my baby. She said I should have protected her from the reminders, and that by not doing so, I'd basically chosen my baby over our bond. I didn't respond, because I don't even know what kind of response she expects. What do you say to someone who believes your child's existence is a personal betrayal? I don't have the energy to explain that I didn't choose to be a mother to upset her. It's also worth mentioning that Caitlin never once asked me how I was doing. Not when I gave birth, nor during my recovery, not even in that message. It was all about how my life had hurt her. I don't expect the world to revolve around me, but apparently she wants the world to revolve around her. And then there's Jack. He started sending my husband direct messages on Instagram. At first, they were pretty normal, then it got weird. She said my husband was filling my head with ideas to turn me against Caitlin, and that he was using his privilege to keep me isolated. What? My husband has barely spoken to Caitlin outside of family gatherings. He's always stayed out of it unless someone crossed the line. He's never told me what to say or do. She only intervened when Jack started acting crazy. We both block Jack and Caitlin now. And then there's Caitlin's younger sister, who's always been the quiet one. We've never been super close, but we get along. He sent me a direct message the day after Jack showed up at my parents' house. He said he didn't want to take sides, but he needed to get in touch because something wasn't right. According to her, Caitlin hasn't been to therapy in months. She stopped going when her last therapist told her that healing might require her to stop seeing herself only as a victim. Caitlin reportedly said the therapist was invalidating her pain and cut her off. Since then, she's only been on online grief forums. The sister said some of those forums help people, but others are like echo chambers. And Caitlin only interacts with those that reinforce everything she already believes. Basically, she's very involved in it. Her sister also said this isn't the first time Jack has tried to physically confront someone on Caitlin's behalf. She said last year Jack had a confrontation with his neighbor over a random comment about her pregnancy. Something like, Jack got out of control, and they had to stop him. She also said that Jack once confronted a nurse at Caitlin's OBGYN office for being indifferent, when they told him he could try again after her next cycle. The sister said she doesn't excuse Jack, but she thinks he's feeding off Caitlin's pain because it gives him a purpose. It makes sense. I think Caitlin was hoping I'd avoid having kids until she had one, or hide everything about it once I did. And when I didn't do either of those things, that was it. I hate that it's come to this, but I don't feel guilty anymore. I'm just tired of being the only one expected to do something, of conforming, of self-censoring so no one feels bad. I'll come back if things get worse, but for now, I'm just focusing on my daughter, my husband, and the people who truly want to be in our lives without making it a battle. Update 2. Caitlin's sister called me late last night. For those who didn't read the last post, she's Caitlin's younger sister. We've been in touch more since this whole thing started to unravel. She said she didn't want to keep secrets anymore, especially with things getting so bad. According to her, Caitlin's miscarriage didn't happen the way the family was told. The sister told me that Caitlin never made it to the end of her first trimester, as she claimed. In fact, she said Caitlin didn't even have a confirmed heartbeat. She took a home test, tested positive, and scheduled a doctor's appointment, but miscarried before going. It all happened over the course of a week. There were no ultrasounds, no checkups, no real confirmation of a viable pregnancy. Basically, it was likely a biochemical pregnancy. These things happen all the time, and they're painful. But according to what the sister said, Caitlin told everyone, including Jack, that she'd lost a baby girl. She picked out a name, said she saw the heartbeat, and told people she'd already bought clothes. None of that happened. Again, I'm not here to minimize anyone's loss. I know biochemical pregnancies hurt too, but for over a year, Caitlin has been speaking the full language of a grieving mother. It wasn't just sadness. It was a complete identity. The sister said Jack was completely invested in this. He was there from the beginning and simply accepted whatever version Caitlin was telling. From the outside, she probably seemed supportive, but now I think she was just enabling and maybe forming a trauma bond, which needless to say, is unhealthy. She also told me that Caitlin had a meltdown a few months ago when another of our cousins got pregnant. She apparently started screaming that it wasn't fair, and told her sister that she would never forgive the universe if I had a baby before her. He said I didn't deserve him, and that everything always worked out for people like me. I guess this was months before I even told anyone I was pregnant. I also spoke to his mom, my aunt, after his sister called me. I just wanted to understand what was going on from her perspective. And to be honest, I was expecting another guilt trip about how I should approach her, or apologize, or whatever, but that didn't happen. She told me, and I'm roughly quoting, that Caitlin's behavior is no longer sustainable, that Jack isn't helping matters, and that she was starting to feel like she was losing her daughter to something she couldn't control. My aunt asked me if I would consider seeing Caitlin in person, not to reconcile, but to give her some closure. She said maybe seeing me could help her move forward. I told her no, as I don't think she's in a place to handle it safely or productively. I also told her I wasn't going to sit across from someone who told me my baby could die in her sleep. That's not just grief. That crosses a line. She said she understood and would try to get Caitlin real treatment. I hope that's true. Jack, for his part, remained silent. The last time he fell, he showed up at my parents' house uninvited. I don't think I'm above doing it again. I'm just glad Caitlin's sister was honest. It can't be easy going against your own sister, but she said she didn't want this to end with anyone getting hurt, and honestly, neither do I. I hope I don't have anything to share for another update. Update 3. So yeah, Jack tried to show up at my house. We have a Ring camera, and that's how I found out. He never knocked on the door, just stood there, hands in his hoodie pockets, looking around as if he was deciding what to do. Then he left. It gave me the creeps, and I'm not easily scared. My husband reported it as non-emergency to the police and asked what we could do to formally document it. They let us file a report and basically told us to call immediately if he shows up again. That was enough for now, but we're not waiting to see how far this goes. We sent the video to Caitlin's sister. She was just as scared as we were and promised that Caitlin didn't know Jack did that. I truly believe her. She's been honest with me since this whole thing started falling apart. And I think she's scared too, he said. Caitlin's been weird lately. Which is saying something for someone like Caitlin lately. Apparently, she's been saying things like, my baby was meant to be hers. She also said the wrong person gave birth. We've started securing everything. Social media profiles, baby photos, even our baby monitor app is now password protected. My husband's boss is a lawyer, and he offered to connect us with someone in case we need to take legal action. We're considering a restraining order if Jack shows up again, even once. What's weirder is how much I still miss the cousin I grew up with. I've known Caitlin practically my whole life. We had phone calls, inside jokes, and family vacations together when she told me she was trying to get pregnant. I remember hugging her and thinking, we're really doing it, becoming mothers together. I thought that would bring us closer. Now I'm closing the doors more securely because I don't trust her husband not to come back. Because I don't know what's real for her anymore. And Jack? I don't even know what to say about him now. The sister told me this is the third time he's shown up at a location unannounced after someone bothered Caitlin, not just the neighbor incident I mentioned earlier. He apparently also went to his own cousin's workplace after the cousin made a joke about Jack and Caitlin being obsessed with babies. I didn't know any of this until this week. So no, I don't think Jack just made a mistake by showing up here. I think he's dangerous, and the fact that she didn't knock makes it worse. I told my mom everything, showed her the video, read her Caitlin's sister's messages. She stayed silent. Then he said, this has gone way beyond the family drama. He's right. We told my aunt, Caitlin's mom, he said. I tried to tell him to see someone, but he won't listen. Update 4. I wasn't planning on posting again, but a few people got in touch asking what happened at the end. Things have finally calmed down, or so I hope. Caitlin is currently in a psychiatric facility. According to her sister, she had a public meltdown at work, yelled at a pregnant coworker, threw something across the room, and had to be escorted out by security. Her boss called Jack, and Jack called his sister. They took her to the hospital, and from there, she was admitted for observation. They're not holding her against her will or anything like that, but she's now receiving psychiatric care, and she's agreed to stay for treatment. Before anyone jumps in, no, I'm not happy we've gotten to this point. I don't think anyone is. It's a horrible situation all around, but I also can't act like I haven't seen it building for months. Her sister told me Caitlin wasn't sleeping and barely eating. He was following a bunch of parent accounts, taking screenshots of random baby photos, and saving them to a folder on his phone. Apparently, he had a photo of my daughter saved there too. Jack hasn't tried to contact us since the incident with our RI camera. We haven't had to escalate it legally yet, but we've taken precautions. I've made it very clear to my family that we won't interact with him, and if anyone gives him personal information, they're out of our lives too. There will be no second chances. Some family members have reached out, saying, now that Caitlin is getting help, maybe it's time for her to forgive and forget. One even suggested bringing my baby to visit her when she's discharged so she can find healing. That's not going to happen. Not now, maybe never. I understand that mental health issues are complicated. I understand that grief manifests in different ways. But my daughter isn't your therapeutic tool. She's not responsible for fixing what Caitlin went through, or what she became afterward. For those asking, no, I haven't spoken to Caitlin. Her sister says she's asked about me in therapy, but she hasn't mentioned wanting to talk directly. If he does, I'll think about it, but it won't be face to face. And it definitely won't be until his doctors say he's stable and on ongoing treatment. And even then, it will be on my terms, with clear boundaries. The rest of the family remains divided. Some people have finally understood why I had to cut off contact. Others still act like I kicked her when she was already down. I'm not going to waste my time trying to convince them anymore. I know what I saw and heard. I know what he said in my house, looking me in the face as I held my daughter. That kind of thing sticks. I'm not angry anymore. I was for a long time, mainly because of how quickly everything turned around. One minute I was the person he leaned on, and the next, I was his enemy for having a baby. That change still hurts a little, but I've accepted that the person I knew, the cousin I grew up with, probably doesn't exist in the same way anymore. I still hope she comes out of this stronger and healthier. I really do, but I'm not going to put myself or my family in his way while he figures it out. My husband has been incredible throughout all of this. Calm when I couldn't be, and clear-headed when everything felt like chaos. She still checks our security cameras every day and checks on our daughter's daycare pickups. I think we're both trying to find a new version of normal. The baby is doing great. He's reaching all his milestones. He's sleeping better. He's growing fast. This is the best part of our lives right now, and keeping her safe, both physically and emotionally, will always be the most important thing, even above family ties. It's incredible how quickly things can fall apart when people don't confront their trauma. I don't regret saying what I said. I don't regret setting that boundary. If anything, I wish I'd done it sooner. Update 5. Until now, I felt sorry for Caitlin, tried to put myself in her shoes, see the pain she was suffering, but no longer. The lies, not only about the timing of her pregnancy, but also about the rest of the situation, make me lose all sympathy for her. Because of course, Caitlin can still cause drama, even if she were receiving psychiatric help. She needs it not only for the loss of her pregnancy, but also for other things she's done. This is what's been happening in the last few months, and it explains a lot about her and her behavior. Behavior that started before she got pregnant, which makes it all the more disturbing. When Caitlin told me she wanted to be a mother, which excited me because I was also planning to be one, she didn't tell me everything. She didn't tell me she was cheating on her husband. Not only that, things in their relationship hadn't been going well before. And it wasn't because of the infidelity. The infidelity came later. The infidelity was so she could get pregnant to trap Jack. She thought that if she got pregnant, even if it wasn't Jack's, it would make him stay. That's why she freaked out so much when she lost him. Her chance was gone. And then, when she saw that Jack was caring for her, protecting her through her pain, she took that and amplified it, to the point where it became her entire identity. Now it's all come out as part of her therapy, and Jack is asking for a divorce. Caitlin will still continue receiving treatment because there are so many things she needs to address. She's not taking this divorce very well, and has had a complete meltdown. But at this point, not even her sister is visiting her, although my aunt doesn't either. There are so many things she's done wrong that it's hard to feel sorry for this woman. The only positive thing to come out of all this is seeing Jack apologize to us and the rest of the family. He said it's been difficult watching his wife's pain through all of this, and he didn't react in the best way. But unlike my cousin, he's getting help and really wants to manage his anger issues. He's also promised to stay away from all of us, now that he's no longer officially part of the family. I can't guarantee this will be my last update, because I don't know what will happen to Caitlin. But the last time her sister saw her, she was in a pretty bad state mentally. She was withdrawn and only muttering. She's far from a normal person, and I don't know how long it will take for her to recover. I also don't know if I'll come back for an update or if I'll just skip this topic. I thought things would get better after 2024 ended, but 2025 has started with more drama from my cousin, and I need to step back from the situation for a bit to decompress. I hope your start to the year has been better than mine, and that everyone's start to be better for the rest of it.